This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It is 3 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, possibly the best decision you'll make all week. But it is early doors. There's plenty of time for this to be improved upon. And once again, we find ourselves surveying a media landscape that is quite spectacularly bent, corrupt, dishonest, morally depraved. I don't know which phrase you prefer, but the front page of the Daily Mail today, which sadly, but I'm afraid accurately, still sets the tone for much media discourse in this country, particularly on, shall we say, a more traditional type of phone-in programme, tells a blatant lie. Worried about immigration, ? Starmer says you're racist. They haven't even bothered to put it in quotes. Keir Starmer could not have succeeded better yesterday in explaining precisely what it was about Nigel Farage's latest abomination that was racist. It is the idea that you will face deportation for the crime of being foreign, even if you have been granted indefinite leave to remain in this country. So even if you have been here working legally, paying your taxes and paying your premium to access the NHS, something that some people seem still to be ignorant about. It's almost as if they're never given the facts that they need to arrive at an informed opinion. Then you face possible risk of deportation, families being split up, children who were born here having to see the possibility of their parents being deported for the crime of being foreign. The only way you could ever conduct a conversation about this that doesn't bang the racism drum every 20 seconds is by not actually asking people what the policy is or not telling them what the actual policy is, but relying upon the lies on the front page of the Daily Mail claiming that Keir Starmer thinks you're racist if you're worried about immigration. I can't believe I have to do this, and I certainly don't think I have to explain why I feel that I do, but would you like to have a listen to the actual conversation that took place and the actual words that came out of the actual mouth of the actual Prime Minister? Or do you prefer to view the world through the distorting and corrupting lens of increasingly far-right journalism? I presume you still, unfashionable though it may be, I presume you still quite like the facts.
You said that proposal is immoral to deport people who are already here if they don't pass more stringent rules. Do you think it's a racist policy?
Well, I do think that it's a racist policy. I do think it's immoral. It needs to be called out for what it is.
And do you think that Reform UK is trying to appeal to racists?
No, I think that there are plenty of people who either vote Reform or are thinking of voting Reform who are frustrated. They had 14 years of failure under the Conservatives. They want us to change things. They may have voted Labour a year ago, and they want the change to come more quickly. I actually do understand that, because if for 14 years your living standards haven't got any better and your public services have declined, then of course you want change.
I'm going to play that to you again, because asked specifically whether or not, and I think he's wrong, I think that Reform are appealing, or at least trying to appeal to racists, and Nigel Farage always has. What newspaper do you think this is from, describing some public comments of his in 2014, would you believe? This is racism, pure and simple. What newspaper? I mean, what is the least... I'm going to give you one clue, all right? It's not the Daily Mail. Although they went pretty close at the same time, at the same point in history. So when that mask slips, as it occasionally does, everybody can see him for exactly what he is. This is racism, pure and simple. What would be the least likely newspaper for that to have appeared in just 11 unbearably long years ago? This is racism, pure and simple. Where are the pearl clutchers now? Where are the phone-ins completely misrepresenting the facts and pretending to be outraged that racists are being called racists? This is racism, pure and simple. What newspaper do you think that was in? You won't believe me when I tell you. It was The Sun. It was The Sun. Asked what the difference would be between Romanians and some Germans, Farage, whose wife is German, said, "You know what the difference is." He told a radio interviewer that people would be worried if a group of Romanians moved in next door. And The Sun was under absolutely no illusions. The Sun, ready, made exactly the same point that Keir Starmer made yesterday. It is not racist to worry about the impact of millions of migrants on Britain, as we have argued for years. It is racist to smear Romanians for being Romanian. It is also, for the record, lest anybody needs this explaining, and apparently some people do, it is also racist to deport Romanians for being Romanian, or indeed anybody for the crime of being from the country that they are from, after they have been granted indefinite leave to remain in this country. It is not racist to worry about the impact of millions of migrants on Britain, as we have argued for years. It is racist to smear Romanians for being Romanian. Nigel Farage, UKIP leader, did just that, says The Sun newspaper in 2014. Isn't it actually extraordinary how far we have fallen from the moment where even The Sun, which, you know, flirts endlessly with far-right ideology and far-right individuals, but even then, just 11 years ago, before the real madness of the Brexit referendum kicked in, even The Sun knew racism when it heard it. Called out racism when it saw it. Listen again to Keir Starmer's words, with this editorial echoing in your mind, OK? It is not racist to worry about the impact of millions of migrants on Britain, as we have argued for years. It is racist to smear Romanians for being Romanian. Nigel Farage, UKIP leader, did just that. So you can describe a policy or an idea as racist without describing everybody who either likes the politician who is being racist or who is drawn to or concerned by arguments about immigration. But here is the Prime Minister in 2025 essentially examining precisely the same avenue that The Sun laid out in 2014. And if you're wondering why my memory is so good about that kind of stuff, it's because I was the radio interviewer.
You said that proposal is immoral, to deport people who are already here if they don't pass more stringent rules. Do you think it's a racist policy?
Well, I do think that it's a racist policy. I do think it's immoral. It needs to be called out for what it is.
And do you think that Reform UK is trying to appeal to racists?
No, I think that there are plenty of people who either vote reform or are thinking of voting reform who are frustrated. They had 14 years of failure under the Conservatives. They want us to change things. They may have voted Labour a year ago, and they want the change to come more quickly. I actually do understand that, because if for 14 years your living standards haven't got any better and your public services have declined, then of course you want change.
11 minutes after 10 is the time. It's extraordinary, isn't it, to think that in the space of 11 years, this country can go from seeing what is arguably the most right-wing newspaper, or possibly the second most right-wing newspaper in the country, displaying no miscomprehension or under no illusions whatsoever about what racism is and what it looks like, and having the courage to call it out when it is espoused by Nigel Farage. And then 11 years later, the Prime Minister does exactly the same thing. Draws the distinction between being concerned about immigration and supporting an obviously racist policy, like deporting foreigners who've done absolutely nothing wrong and who have been granted legal right to remain in this country for forever. It gets completely misrepresented. It gets lied about in the Daily Mail and elsewhere. Worried about immigration? Starmer says you're racist. Except he didn't. He categorically didn't. Absolutely extraordinary. Almost as extraordinary as interviewing people from Farage's outfit without mentioning the fact that one of their leadership has just been convicted of, or just pleaded guilty to, accepting bribes from a pro-Russian character in order to seed debate in the European Parliament. I'll say that again, because why it's not on every front page in the country is a question only the editor of the Daily Mail could answer. A member of Reform UK's leadership has found himself in court pleading guilty to accepting bribes in return for spreading pro-Russian propaganda in the European Parliament. More on that later in the programme. So, 12 minutes after 10 is the time. There is a what would you call it? An intellectual debate to be had about the difference between racism and xenophobia. But that Sun editorial back in 2014 conflated the two. If there was ever to be an intellectual debate about the semantics in this kind of case, it would probably be on this programme, but not today, OK? But not today. It is racist to want people to be deported for being foreign. It's a National Front policy, dripping with the hatred and the bile of the 1970s. To conflate the two, to pretend that Keir Starmer is calling you racist if you're worried about immigration. Nick took caller after call today, who people explaining why they're worried about immigration. Not a single one, as far as I could hear, was saying that they want to actually have people deported who've been granted indefinite leave to remain. The only way you can inflate this balloon of Rollocks. The only way, I know the alliteration doesn't work, I'll let you insert the rhyme yourself. The only way you can inflate this balloon of absolute nonsense is by failing to hit the explanation of what the policy is at every turn. And Keir Starmer has been a little frustrated by perhaps his naivety about just how dishonest members of the UK media would be, and just how far the country has fallen since The Sun could respond to racism by saying, "This is racism, pure and simple." 11 years later, the Daily Mail responds to racism, an actually and obviously racist policy, by saying, "Worried about immigration? Starmer says you're racist." There's part of me that wonders whether I should just hit rewind and play, showing my analogue roots there, on that exchange between Keir Starmer and Laura Kuenssberg, who happily took a couple of minutes off asking him questions about a field he bought for his parents to keep donkeys in, and actually went in on the mortal threat posed to stability and decency in this country by the rise of the far right. But I could just hit rewind and play on that for the rest of the hour. Because it is, I mean, how do you even do this? And stop picking me up on my pronunciation of Roma. Well, no, pick me up on it, of course, but it was Canada last week, and now it's Romanians. It was Romania when I was growing up. It's so hard to keep pace with these. Why is everyone so critical? What do you want me to say, Robert? Okay, Romanian. Sorry. And when I collected stamps in the 1970s and 80s, well, never mind. So here's the point. That is breathtaking, right? That simple 11-year decline from a point where The Sun could call racism when it came out of Farage's mouth, to a point where The Mail tells blatant and obvious lies on its front pages about Keir Starmer making a point identical to the one made in The Sun 11 years previously. But did Keir Starmer do the right thing by describing the far right thing? You see what I did there? The reason I talk about naivety, and I genuinely don't know the answer to this question at this point, although it could be one that if I spend 5 minutes thinking about it with you, I arrive at my position much more quickly. When you see what happens now in Britain in 2025, that's why the comparisons with 2014 are so interesting. When you see what happens, when Keir Starmer says on national television, "I am not calling you a racist if you're concerned about immigration," and the next morning national newspapers and national broadcast platforms say, "He's calling you a racist if you're concerned about immigration," I'm going to say that again. So Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of these islands, sits on national television and states absolutely, irrefutably and categorically that he is not calling people who have concerns, correct or not, doesn't matter. He is not calling, I'll say that again, he is not calling people concerned about immigration racist. He is categorically not doing that. He went to great pains to make it clear that he was not doing that, and the words that came out of his mouth left absolutely no room for doubt or confusion. Fast forward 16 hours, turn on your television, turn on your radio, open your newspaper, you don't even need to open it, and you are being told that he called you racist if you've got concerns about immigration. I could open up the phone lines now and ask you, how do you feel about being called a racist just because you've got concerns about immigration? And of course I could fail miserably to tell you that that's not what he said at all. I'm just too busy stoking up your anger, feeling all your hatred, bubbling all your bile. Isn't it awful? He's called you racist. Spoiler alert, he hasn't. Isn't it terrible? Keir Starmer thinks you're racist if you've got concerns about immigration. Don't tell them the truth. Don't tell them the truth, whatever you do. Don't tell them what the policy is. Don't ask them to describe the policy because they won't be able to. Just keep telling him he thinks you're a racist. He thinks you're a racist. Except he was at great pains to explain that he didn't. And many people on the left think that he's actually sailed far too close to the racist tides for safety. But that's why the question that I have got today is a strange one. Has Keir Starmer made a mistake by telling the truth? Because of the... And I crucially want to make this point, because of the world we live in today. Because this is 2025, when, as we discussed last week, people profess to be much, much more offended by the act of a racist being called a racist than they do by a victim of racism being a victim of racism. That's an extraordinary point that a caller made last week. It was the idea that we have created a public forum and a media discourse where, oh, he called you a racist, is a bigger deal than an actual racist attack or actual racist abuse. It's just true, right? It's the victimhood. It's the same narrative of Brexit and Boris Johnson and all the other nonsense. Is that you're a victim. You're a victim. Oh, you poor thing. You're a victim. You're a victim. He thinks you're a racist. He's called you he hasn't done any of those things. But you appeal to people's bogus victimhood and they will almost always thank you for it. So that's the world we live in now. 2025, members of the media who would either have stayed silent or done what the Sun did back in 2014 when Farage did a racism, are now pretending that Keir Starmer has said things that he categorically hasn't said. And because he uses that word, he leaves himself exposed to precisely these sort of lies. So has he done the right thing by telling the truth? 0345 6060 973. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. It's one of the strangest questions I've ever asked you. And I am, for the record, very much of the view now, as I finally get to the end of this introduction, that of course he's done the right thing, whatever the consequences. But I'm a radio presenter. I'm not a Prime Minister. Has Keir Starmer done the right thing by telling the truth about this racist, or if you prefer, this profoundly xenophobic policy? Hit the numbers now, you will get through.
James O'Brien on LBC.
22 minutes after 10 is the time, and it is one of the strangest questions I've ever asked you. We live in a country now where I think it probably merits repetition that the people who told you, but the people who have made us poorer, weaker, lonelier and less safe are now telling you lies about Keir Starmer, and sadly they still occupy some of the most senior positions in the UK media. And Keir Starmer has put a cat among those particularly pungent pigeons by describing a racist policy as racist, leaving him, even to my surprise, open to completely bogus allegations that he has called people who are concerned about immigration racists. Even by the standards of the last 10 years, it's an exercise in media manipulation of which Joseph Goebbels would be proud. But here it is on the front of the Daily Mail. Worried about people being deported after they've been given indefinite leave to remain in this country. That's not the front page. Worried about immigration, ? Starmer says you're racist. Should he have done this? Should he have told the truth, given the fever pitch that this discourse is currently reaching? Arwad is in Liverpool. Arwad, what would you like to say?
Hi, I must admit I was previously going to call about how I thought Starmer should resign. This has made me change my mind. I think he was absolutely correct in describing a racist policy as racist.
Even though it leaves him open to, and I don't know whether you've been as surprised as I have, people telling blatant lies all over your newspapers and your radio this morning. Because it works. You know, here is someone who doesn't really know what the policy is, who doesn't understand that indefinite leave to remain involves having to pay to use the NHS, who doesn't know any of the facts because they listen to people that never tell them the facts, or they read newspapers that never tell them the facts. And spoiler alert, well, their vote is worth exactly the same as yours, and now they're being told Keir Starmer thinks you're a racist because you're uncomfortable with the immigration levels in this country. Just ignore every speech he's made since he became Prime Minister, displaying the polar opposite of that position. Shouldn't he have been more frightened of how effective the lies can be?
I mean, they've been attacking Keir Starmer with the same level of aggression nearly only a few months after he'd taken office. erroneous notion that the UK has two-tier policing, or that Lucy Connolly was Keir Starmer's political prisoner, has been paddled and paddled, in spite of the fact that Lucy Connolly was convicted under a law passed in 1988. Which
she pleaded guilty, mate, as well. I mean, it wasn't even
Keir Starmer had nothing to do with her conviction, and yet they peddled the idea that she was supposedly Keir Starmer's political prisoner. They were always going to attack him from these multiple angles. I'm glad that Keir Starmer actually rightfully stood up to it in spite of the scrutiny that he might get from hard right papers.
Do you think he'll be surprised? I mean, I do this for a living, and I am, you'll allow me, I hope, a fairly faithful chronicler of the decline the country's undergone since that Sun editorial in 2014 to where it is today. I couldn't actually believe my eyes. There's a lot of spoof front pages put together on social media. I saw this front page on Blue Sky this morning, and I thought someone had... I actually, hand on heart, I thought someone had doctored it. Because I heard the speech, I heard the interview. Worried about immigration, Starmer says you're racist, doesn't reflect a single syllable of the interview that unfolded on national television.
Yes, but the thing is, the Overton window has shifted so much to the right. I've seen countless and countless statements. Like, I genuinely thought that as much as I dislike Nigel Farage, for a moment, I thought him saying that immigrants were eating the swans was AI.
Yeah, OK. I mean, that is the world that we live in. It wasn't AI. Sadly, it was in this very studio, although it is, I grant you, increasingly hard to tell the difference. It is a lie, this front page, and anyone repeating it is a liar, and probably a racist, because the only reason why you would want to perpetrate this lie is precisely because you like the racism and you want to pretend that it isn't racism. So... is Keir Starmer picking the right fight at the right time? Or is it perhaps, and forgive me for turning briefly into Donald Rumsfeld, is it the wrong fight at the wrong time, the wrong fight at the right time, the right fight at the wrong time, or the right fight at the right time? Apologies if I missed one out. Jean-Christophe is in Ealing. Jean-Christophe, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I think it's absolutely bonjour. It's absolutely the right time to call it out. And I think Keir Starmer was right to call it out. I think he did it trying to really make the nuance between calling everybody racist, which is not the case, and calling the policy racist. And it's just a shame that a newspaper has mixed the two together.
Yes, but it's quite a big shame because, of course, it won't just be the newspaper. There will also be people in my line of work who get their instructions from the front page of the Daily Mail every morning and rarely bother to think any deeper than what they've been told in a story that is... I mean, demonstrably untrue. And I guess what it hinges on is the potential Reform voter doing the homework and finding out that they're being lied to again, or responding to the emotional invitation to be angry and feel victimised. And that, I mean, it's a weird question to be asking, Jean-Christophe, because I don't know how Keir Starmer deals with the anger, the bogus victimisation and the very carefully cultivated anger. But the truth will make it worse.
No, you're right. But, one way is this way of thinking has started during the Brexit vote. I think we've all seen the way that certain politicians and certain media have manipulated, to a degree, their audience. And in a way, it's freedom of speech, so why not do it? In a case like this, one question I had for you or anybody maybe who's listening to this who's a lawyer is if what the Daily Mail has reported is factually incorrect, is there a way, as it has been the case in many other cases, for someone to take them to court? They'd
never take it to court, but IPSO could get involved. Of course, it's just another reminder of the awfulness of that decision to abandon the Leveson inquiry when it was only halfway through, which is, of course, what these people dreamt of and pray for. And I think back to other front pages. There was the one that attacked High Court judges, called them enemies of the people. There was the one that echoed Nazi language, saying crush the saboteurs, when elected parliamentarians, were poised to exercise their democratic rights to vote in a way that the editor of the Daily Mail didn't like. You've got our Remainer universities, an attack upon academic freedoms, which, of course, assumes an even more sinister tone. Now we've seen what's happening in the United States of America. But this, for me, is up there. This for me is up there. In terms of blatant dishonesty, it's possibly the worst one ever. Worried about immigration, Starmer says you're racist, when I will just remind you briefly about what Starmer actually said, because even to a veteran of this issue, I can't believe the gulf between what the British public are being told by the Daily Mail and their mouthpieces in the broadcast media and what Keir Starmer actually said on national television.
You said that proposal is immoral, to deport people who are already here if they don't pass more stringent rules. Do you think it's a racist policy?
Well, I do think that it's a racist policy. I do think it's immoral. It needs to be called out for what it is.
And do you think that Reform UK is trying to appeal to racists?
No, I think that there are plenty of people who either vote Reform or are thinking of voting Reform who are frustrated. They had 14 years of failure under the Conservatives. They want us to change things. They may have voted Labour a year ago, and they want the change to come more quickly. I actually do understand that, because if for 14 years your living standards haven't got any better and your public services have declined, then of course you want change.
So do you think these people are racist? No, I categorically don't. Let me explain why. Fast forward 24 hours, front page of the Daily Mail, he thinks you're racist. And we still put up with this, and I still don't know why. But I do know that Thomas Watts is here with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:33 is the time. Starmer was crazy to answer the question by saying that the policy was racist. It's so easy for the right-wing media to twist that. He should have said that the policy does not align with his liberal values, but that he understood why people are attracted to it. That's from Noel. And in the same moment, Alan texted to say, James, I love you, but give your head a wobble. You're asking the question whether it is right to call racism racism. And that's why I'm asking the question. Because I'm probably a lot closer to Adam than I am to Noel on the truth being the truth, and it must always out. But it's a valid question because it prompted both of those two answers. And then there's the question, which I haven't asked you, of whether or not he should have actually gone further. Of course, writes Keith, Reform are trying to appeal to racists. What possible other reason could there be? We're all too scared to say so. Those of us with more humanity, too scared to call a racist. Please change my mind. Well, they weren't scared in 2014, Keith. If the Sun could do it, anybody could. Nigel Farage was challenged yesterday over whether UKIP is racist. He put a gun to his temple and fired. The dictionary definition is judging another race to be inferior because of a prejudice that all its members have the same characteristics. Farage told a radio interviewer people would be worried if a group of Romanians moved in next door. And on it goes. And, I mean, heartbreaking to think that back then racism was a big problem and Farage was spreading it like it was going out of fashion, but even the Sun would stand up and say so. Now, Daily Mail and others rolling out red carpets for the racism. Does that change your calculation on whether Keir Starmer has done the right thing? How should he have answered that question? Should he actually have said, of course people who are attracted to racist policies are racist? Maybe that would just have been easier. If you think people who've been given a legal right to live in this country for the rest of their days should be deported for being foreign, then yes, you are racist. Or if you want to get semantic and pedantic about it, you're xenophobic. That is the problem. When liars are setting the tone and setting the parameters of public discourse, what do people committed to the truth do? I still don't know. And it is, of course, a question for the ages. Sean is in Coventry. Sean, what would you like to say?
I think it's absolutely the right thing. 100% he said the right thing. And we've had for, 14 plus years, politicians are just feeding into populism, right? And here you've got somebody who's standing on principle. It's a racist policy, therefore we're going to call it a racist policy.
I can't even believe we're having the conversation, actually, when I hear you repeating it back to me. Do you know what I mean?
Well, 100%. I mean, look, the problem is, it's a policy that appeals to a lot of people. So my dad is an immigrant. He came over 40-odd years ago. He's a British citizen now, but he buys into the whole Farage spiel. He's fully supportive of Farage's policies. And I'm like, you realise that you would be victim to those policies, right?
As a British citizen, I think he'd be okay. But if he was here on indefinite leave to remain, he could be deported.
Well, and this is what I'm trying to explain to him. I was like, look, you've got a family here who are on indefinite leave. Now, I'm a headhunter, and I headhunt into accountancy practices. And the amount of skilled people that we have who are sat here on indefinite leave is phenomenal. I mean, you take them out of the equation, right? These are people who are making £300,000, £400,000, £500,000, right?
Yeah, so I don't mean them. I'm not going to deport them, but that's not the point, is it? It's the fact that you would be free to on a whim, you know.
And it's about kind of ultimately just chastising those people who, as you said, their only fault is to be born in a different country, which, I mean, does that then quantify Nigel Farage's family, right? The German wife and kids, right? I mean, okay, yeah, they're on a different type of visa.
His
but
girlfriend found £800,000 down the back of a sofa a few years after having to get a job as a waitress because she was close to bankruptcy. So, you know, maybe they could introduce special rules for immigrants who found £800,000 to buy their boyfriend a house down the back of a sofa. They can stay, but the ones who haven't found £800,000 down the back of a sofa to buy their boyfriend a house, they have to go.
Well, Nick Ferrari this morning had a call from a guy who was like a union rep. I think his name was Adam, and he was saying to Nick, he was like, I don't like the fact that we're being called racist, and he then proceeded to say, I don't mind coloured people, and it's like, well, a gospel truth. That's exactly what he said.
I have to take your word for it.
Yeah.
Did he know what the policy was? Did he know that he was in favour of deporting people for the crime of being foreign?
Who knows?
Well,
I
presume he was asked.
Yeah, he was asked, and he was having a debate with another caller, so it was literally just a case of argue the point between yourselves, right? But it just, I'm
Should
glad...
Starmer have gone further?
I think baby steps, right? I think right now he's under so much criticism for everything, right? And I voted Starmer, and I don't like some of his policies, the whole kind of going after people with vulnerabilities and disabilities and that sort of stuff, not my cup of tea, right? But I do think that, look, we have to... Not everybody's going to be happy with every single policy, right? But if you were to take into account the decisions that he is making, they're not terrible decisions. Standing on principle, yes. Should he go as far as saying, everybody's a racist? Probably not. I don't think at this point, because what you are then doing is you're 100% going to move those on the fence reform voters over to reform.
When do you think that moved? Because as I keep reminding you, in 2014, even The Sun was confident enough to call racism, whereas I actually agree with you now. And look, The Sun didn't say everybody who supports Nigel Farage is a racist. It just simply said, here he is doing racism, blatant, obvious, undeniable racism, and making the point that if you've been persuaded that immigration is a major problem in this country, that doesn't make you a racist. It either makes you genuinely concerned about immigration or gullible, but it doesn't make you racist. And yet I kind of agree with you that baby steps to where? Baby steps back to 2014, Sean?
I don't think we'll ever get to the good old days of 2014, right? I think if we could edge a little bit closer to pre-Brexit, that would be nice.
Well, it's kind of the same thing, isn't it? And that is such an interesting milestone, that moment. And I'd missed it at the time. I was a little bit preoccupied with some of the other fallout from that extraordinary public racism from Farage. The idea that The Sun would have called it out, and the Mail on Sunday weren't far behind, if I remember correctly. And now, here's some racism. Oh, thank you, Nigel. Here's a red carpet. Jeff's in Woking. Jeff, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello, mate.
Yes, I too saw the interview yesterday, and when Sir Keir was pressed on the subject and he answered the question, did he think that the policies, Farage's policies were immoral and racist? He said, well, yes.
Yes.
And he qualified it by stating that what they're trying to do is to get rid of people from this country who've been here for many years with their families and children, worked hard, and they were trying to get them out of the country. Now, I mean, Farage has got form. If you remember during the Brexit debate, there was a lot of people, and still are a lot of people in this country who are not British, and they never actually become British. They kept their nationality. And there was a question mark over whether those people would stay in the country, And when he was asked about whether he thought the voters were racist, he said, well, no, they're not. He said, I can understand their frustration about the state of the country he's inherited, and they want it fixed sort of overnight, a switch.
It is, I don't want to be too repetitive. It's extraordinary to me that the facts are so clear and so available, and yet the discourse, defined by this front page of the Daily Mail, but picked up with great enthusiasm elsewhere, the discourse is so corrupt. It's extraordinary. It's only 24 hours ago that this interview took place, and you are on the radio describing what actually happened in the context of a conversation that follows discussions about something that never happened. Something that literally never happened. Worried about immigration, Starmer says you're racist. No, he didn't. No, he doesn't. No, he wouldn't. Some people might wish that he did. I don't, for the record, but can you get your head around the scale of this madness?
Well, James, I don't think he said anything controversial.
He didn't.
In fact, I thought the interview was one of the best interviews I've seen him do, but that's another story. But no, to say that deporting people from the country who've lived here for many years is immoral and racist. I mean, what's controversial about that?
I guess if you are a racist, you still don't like the label. They're not quite ready yet, the racists, to embrace Steve Bannon's invitation to wear the badge with pride. And I don't say that glibly. I think I've been puzzled for a while why people still get so. I mean, they've moved it now, as we've seen, from 2014 to 2025. The move is extraordinary. We've also now created an environment where people being called racist is perceived as a greater offence than people being victims of actual racism. But they still don't like the label. They still don't like being told what they are. And back in 2014, the Sun was prepared to do it. Now it would seem that hardly anybody is. And yet here we are. Jeff listened to an interview and heard nothing controversial. Do you know why? Because in the interview Jeff listened to, nothing controversial was said, which is why right-wing media has to lie about what was said or pretend not to understand the difference between being concerned about immigration and being racist. Wow. Andre's in Barnet. Andre, what would you like to say?
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Very welcome.
Thank you. Morning. The first thing I want to say is I think he did the right thing. I think no matter what he said, he was always going to be misrepresented, and he was going to have this anger pitted against normal people that vote for reform, and they were deliberately going to conflate the issues and deliberately slander him. I saw another perfect example of this in The Sun over the weekend. Shabana Mahmood did an interview with The Sun talking about immigration rules and ILR and tightening up the rules on it. And there was a video of her talking about it on the Sun's webpage while there's the article, and there's a video of her being interviewed and answering the questions. And while she's talking, they kept the audio going, but they cut the video, and instead of showing her, they showed videos of small boats with asylum seekers crossing the English Channel, which has nothing to do with what she was talking. Exactly.
Indefinite leave to remain.
Exactly. It's nothing to do with ILR, nothing to do with legal immigration, paying taxes, claiming benefits, all of that. And that is deliberately tricking people who aren't fully educated, who don't understand the facts, and who don't know what's going to happen, tricking them and making them angry and making them think, look what she's doing. She's bringing more asylum seekers on small boats.
So he has to. He could have gone further. That's a conversation perhaps for a different day, or I think we may have had it last week. But there's no suggestion so far, except from liars. I mean, the only people who could say that he shouldn't have said what he said are the people who are lying about what he actually said. It's the only way you can sustain the idea that there's anything controversial or difficult here. While we're playing Spot the Paper, you brought The Sun back into it. I've been quoting from their editorial in 2014. What newspaper do you think this was published in 2015, Andre? This is the UKIP official masterminding Nigel Farage's campaign to become an MP, pictured in his days as a leading figure in the National Front. Martin Heal, current chairman of Mr Farage's party in Thanet South, was head of a London branch of the racist organisation. Mr Heal claims that the National Front, which supports the compulsory repatriation of all non-white immigrants, was just a bit of a social club when he ran the local group in 1978. What paper do you think had the courage and the confidence and the decency to run that story in 2015?
I have a guess. The Telegraph.
No, the Mail on Sunday, mate.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
The Mail on Sunday, 10 years ago. 10 years ago, troubled by somebody trying to get into Parliament with the support of an obvious racist. And now, he's in Parliament and they're rolling out the red carpet. We have to remember this stuff. We have to remind each other of this stuff, because the alternative is to think that you've taken leave of your senses, up to and including listening to an interview that is being hideously misrepresented across almost all, happily not all, but almost all of the UK media. And asking people if they are racist, or if they are cross about being called racist without telling them what it is that has actually happened. It's breathtaking. But, hey, look, if I was sitting here today and I had brought you Brexit, told you it was going to be brilliant, if I'd spent years telling you Boris Johnson was a stand-up guy who was going to be great for this country, I'd ushered in austerity because you can't blame the bankers for an international financial crisis caused by the bankers. If I denied the existence of poverty until parents claimed they couldn't afford to pay the extra VAT on their school fees, rolled out a red carpet and tickled the toes of Liz Truss as she set fire to the UK economy, all of those things. What is left for the Daily Mail? What is left for them? To give up, go home and admit that they've got everything wrong for the best part of 20 years? Or to double down on all that's left, which is xenophobic lies and racism? Right, the perfect stage for Nigel Farage to perform on. But only 10 years ago, they weren't frightened of the truth. Newspaper reports from the time, unearthed by the Mail on Sunday, paint a very different picture of the organisation. One article from the West London Observer included a picture of Mr Hill alongside reports that the police were planning to ban a National Front march in April 78 because the officers thought there was bound to be violence when the protesters were confronted by anti-Nazi demonstrators. Anti-Nazi demonstrators. Now, there it is. What could possibly have attracted a man like that to join Nigel Farage's political movement? Answer? Well, it's pretty obvious today. 10:48 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
51 is the time, and given that we are running through things that are frankly unbelievable, hearing members of Reform being interviewed on television or the radio without being asked about events towards the end of last week when a former very senior member of their leadership team, their leader in Wales, no less, admitted 8 counts of bribery. It gets worse. He accepted money in return for making pro-Russian statements in the European Parliament. So just think about that for 1 second. Compare it perhaps to, I don't know, Angela Rayner's stamp duty. A British former member, let me read you the Reuters introduction. A British former member of the European Parliament and ex-leader of Reform UK in Wales pleaded guilty on Friday to bribery charges relating to pro-Russian statements he had made. That's 8 counts of bribery relating to payments, agreeing to accept money in return for making pro-Russian statements in the European Parliament. Who described this man as being as honest as the day is long? Was it A, Joseph Goebbels, B, Nigel Farage, or C, Vladimir Putin? A man who has pleaded guilty to 8 counts of taking payments from a tool of the Kremlin in return for making pro-Russian statements in the European Parliament was described as terrific and as honest as the day is long by A, Joseph Goebbels, B, Nigel Farage, or C, Vladimir Putin. There will be no prizes for providing the correct answer on this occasion. OK, there are, however, a couple of phone lines free, 0345 6060973, to tell me whether Keir Starmer, and the more we look at this mess, the more you wonder whether he should have gone further faster. But the idea that he may have made a mistake by introducing the word racism to public discourse because of what racists and liars will do with that simple fact is yet to receive any support on this programme. Sam's in Streatham. Sam, what would you like to say?
Oh, good morning, James.
Hello, Sam.
You're a bit of a hero, so I'm very, very thrilled to be speaking to you this morning.
That's ridiculous, but thank you very much.
It's true. You often you often quote George Orwell about something about the truth, and I went online to try and find it. I couldn't find the one that you usually say, but is it something like, as long as you hang on to the truth, you don't go mad?
There was truth and there was untruth, and if you clung to the truth, even against the whole world, you would not go mad. You were not mad. Well, you were not mad.
I didn't find that one, but I found another one which was attributed to Orwell, but your researcher said, actually, it's AI, it's not. But it's someone called...
Spoil sport.
Yeah, but it's a very, I'm just going to say, it's Selwyn Duke, and it says, the further a society drifts from the truth, the more it will hate those who speak it.
There's some truth in that.
I just thought that was... Yeah, I just thought it was worth saying. I also want to say, I sat and watched Keir Starmer yesterday on the television, and I punched the air with excitement because I thought, finally, he's taking the gloves off and telling it like it is to reform. And I think the more that he does that, I wonder whether the papers have reacted so vehemently this morning because they've got, oh, hang on, we've got a fight on our hands.
Well, also, they've got no choice, because unless you admit that Brexit was a disaster,
Exactly.
Nigel Farage, major architect of Brexit, that Boris Johnson was a Daily Mail columnist, Boris Johnson was a disaster. Boris Johnson's passage into Downing Street greased liberally by Nigel Farage. Unless you admit that austerity was a disaster and that 14 years of Tories are the reason why, A, immigration has exploded, if that really does keep you awake at night, and B, the country is perceived as falling apart in many areas. It's all on the people that they championed and propelled into Downing Street or propelled into referendum victories. It's all on them. And the only person left standing, dishonest enough to pretend that it isn't all their fault, is Nigel Farage.
And Keir Starmer stood up yesterday and called him out. And he stood up to him. And I just think there's a lot of people in the country today who are just going, it was Andy Burnham, it was Keir Starmer. It was actually, oh, hang on, we have got a leader who is prepared to tell the truth. We had to watch him stand on stage with Donald Trump last week when Trump lied to a room full of the world's press, and no one called him out. I've never met Peter Mandelson, and it was Albania and Azerbaijan at war. It's like, no, it wasn't.
Never heard of him. Never heard of Peter Mandelson. And of course, still repeating lies about the 2020 election, which I think that it was such a moment. Brexit set the scene, as they all admit. They all sort of talk about how Brexit was proof that you could get massive lies over the line with the connivance of enough fellow travellers and media organisations. But lying about that election and then unleashing that mob on January the 6th, and then getting back into the White House. It's as if Western democracy, as we have known it for all of our lives, has ceased to exist. So why wouldn't the Daily Mail tell an obvious and blatant lie on its front page? 10:57 is the time. Sam, thank you, and thank you for the kind words. We have to keep moving forward, otherwise we'll all go backwards. Al's in Glasgow. Al, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi. So did Starmer tell the truth? I think yes. He's pretty good at... I think he's pretty good at pitching things right, but he should ramp this up over time, and I think he will. I'm reminded of that 2014 interview as you just leave Farage to unspool, and he can't help himself. And to stay relevant and to stay front and centre, he'll have to ramp up the rhetoric. He'll have to veer ever closer to whatever it was he had in common with that National Front organiser who was running his parliamentary campaigns in 2015. That is who he is. That's what has animated him for his entire life, never mind his political career. Nearly 4 years out from another election. So Starmer, I think, waits until he crosses the line into obvious racism and then says, look, there's some obvious racism. What I don't think anybody foresaw was members of the UK media lying. I mean, lying so barefacedly and so blatantly about it. And that's the only reason I wondered whether Starmer may have made a mistake, but I think it's pretty clear that he hasn't. I think one thing about... I think definitely Starmer should be on the front foot. And I think one way to draw away the veil around Farage is to... because he's got not much experience in government itself, but his associations... And there's so much material on Farage's associations with Trump. And in that, for example, if you look at Stephen Miller, a close associate of, well, he's a senior government official, isn't he, for Trump. That guy is absolutely overtly...
let's just go with hideous.
Oh, yeah, God, yeah. I mean, I was
and they want to sort of have people arrested now for calling them authoritarian. I mean, it's extraordinary. The people who claim to be the great champions of free speech, the sort of thick-skinned anti-snowflake warriors, are the most pathetic, mealy-mouthed, thin-skinned little cowards that have ever graced public life. It is genuinely breathtaking.
And they compensate by rage and fury and hatred. And he refers to things like a righteous army rising and refers to war and rage. And you can actually see with Farage some time ago, he was starting to use that terminology as well a little bit. So I think a lot of effort needs to be put into drawing the direct
associations and similarities between Farage and
Trump. Well, it's very tricky, that, actually, for reasons that I know you understand, but they do still, for good or for ill, have to keep, or they feel that they have to keep Trump sweet. I mean, the F word will be next, of course. So senior Republicans in the United States have called for the actual governor of California to be arrested for calling Stephen Miller, the man that Al just referred to, a fascist. That's it, just a fascist. Nothing worse than that. And, I mean, there is a very strong case to be made that he fits the dictionary definition of the words by dint of his actual public pronouncements. But what we learned after the appalling murder of Charlie Kirk was that you are not allowed to judge these people or to assess these people according to their actual public pronouncements. You're just going to lock people up or attack them for what I believe the right used to call hurty words when they were telling lies about restrictions or threats to their own freedoms of speech. Thank you, Al. It's 1 minute after 11. Rachel Reeves' Speech 2 conference is at 12 noon today, and it should be quite a big one. I'm minded at the moment to take it in its entirety, and I think in the next hour I'm going to break the habit of a lifetime. I hardly ever do phone-ins about conference speeches or budgets, even after they've happened. But on this occasion, I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to throw the cat among the pigeons. Can we think of any other figures of speech that might fit the occasion here? I think I've got an idea that might prompt a really interesting phone-in as a precursor to a speech from a Chancellor of the Exchequer. Find out more after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Sorry, I forgot to give you the answer to the question of who said this in 2017 about a man who has pleaded guilty to accepting bribes from a Kremlin stooge in return for making pro-Russia statements in the European Parliament. I have worked with Nathan Gill over a period of years, and he's been terrific. He's never, ever let me down. He's as honest as the day is long. I asked you whether it was A, Joseph Goebbels, B, Nigel Farage, or C, Vladimir Putin, and the answer is A. No, the answer is B, Nigel Farage, once again demonstrating his impeccable judgment and indeed taste in colleagues and politicians. I have worked with Nathan Gill over a period of years, and he's been terrific. He's never ever let me down. And what's this? Oh my goodness me, here's a photograph of Nigel Farage with the wife of the Kremlin stooge who bribed the former leader of Reform UK in Wales. But hey-ho, donkeys and stamp duty and some other stuff. 6 minutes after 11 is the time. I've got a weird one for you, and I don't think you're going to like me for it. So the other sort of discourse that is unfolding at the moment, the other discourse that is unspooling as we speak, is about our economy. And Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, is set to deliver a speech at about 12 noon today, which I am currently minded to take live, and which may contain news about tax. The conversation, and I'm not brilliant at keeping track of all this stuff, and I'm even worse at understanding why the spotlight seems to move around a little bit. I think VAT is currently the area in which the Chancellor is most likely to try to raise a little bit of money. And I've got some thoughts. Those are the most frightening words in the English language. I've got some thoughts. And I don't quite get the almost consensus that governments can't put taxes up. I don't want to be lazy about this, and I get out of London a lot. I don't live in like central leafy London anymore. Chiswick, where I used to live, is a very comfortable area. Brentford, where I live now, less so. I mean, it's being gentrified as we speak. But I was in Kidderminster for the whole weekend, the town where I grew up, and where, you know, I've told you a few times, it's a fascinating town centre. I love Kidderminster. It's one of those weird, irrational, emotional connections that people have, and that can sometimes be exploited. It's my home. And it breaks my heart sometimes to wander through the streets and see the decline. And then you turn a corner from the old town centre into the new town centre, and actually things are a little bit, but their Debenhams are shut down. It's been replaced by a B&M after being empty for years, and it's complicated. If it was a romantic relationship, you'd probably call it messy. And I got a little bit premature last week when we were talking about high streets, and I described how the old Woolworths in Kidderminster, having been empty for the best part of 20 years, is now a wonderful park. It's not. I apologise. That was fake news. It's a building site. Admittedly, it's a very busy building site with about 10 diggers on it and a massive crane. You know how I like a crane. But it is a building site, so it's a little early to report upon the successful attempt to regenerate that particular corner of my hometown. But there is an air almost everywhere, and don't at me with exceptions, because I think we can all agree that after 14 years of Tory rule, the absurd self-harm of Brexit, the insanity of Boris Johnson's regime, and the unavoidable difficulties and impacts of a global pandemic. So if you were to actually chart the country between two global catastrophes, from the global financial crisis of 2008 to the global pandemic of 2000 would we say 21? Does your brain go funny when you try and remember that period? To actually pinpoint dates, like when lockdowns began and when they end? Because everything just merged and blurred into one, didn't it? But you look at the administration of this country between those two global catastrophes, particularly including the second one, because something else that the UK media managed to overlook quite spectacularly was the extraordinary role that Gordon Brown and the late Alistair Darling played in steering the entire world through the choppiest of waters during that global financial crisis. But you look at the state of the country and the scars are very real, right? The scars are very, very real. And I find as I get older, I find myself increasingly baffled at the impossibility of having a sensible conversation about tax in this country. I think we would all agree that public services have declined, right? Or it feels like they have. It feels harder to get a doctor's appointment for many, many people. Hospital waiting rooms, A&E, feels worse than it did 20 years ago. In fact, you know that in 2010, patient satisfaction in the NHS was the highest on record. And, spoiler alert, it isn't now. I'm not a driver particularly, but I'm a cyclist, so I feel potholes perhaps even more keenly than the average motorist does. And sometimes now, driving around this country, I'm reminded of going on family holidays to Spain in the 1980s, where I couldn't believe... I was a very fascinating child. I couldn't believe the state of the roads. Potholes everywhere you go. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? You've got towns that are... dying on their feet. Regeneration, announced last week by the Labour government, is to be welcomed but may not touch the sides. All of this is, it seems to me, evidence that the government needs to raise more money. But no one else seems to agree with me. I don't know enough about the Liberal Democrats and the Greens. It's a work in progress and it's getting better. Ditto, even more embarrassingly, perhaps the SNP and Plaid Cymru, who are doing brilliantly at the moment in the polls in Wales. I wonder whether they'll be helped by news that the former leader of Farage's outfit in Wales is a Kremlin patsy, a receiver of bribes from Kremlin stooges in Ukrainian politics, someone who accepts money to make statements in the European Parliament that are entirely in favour of Vladimir Putin's murderous dictatorship. Vladimir Putin, of course, the politician admired most by Nigel Farage. And look, there he is, photographed with the wife of Oleg Voloshin, who is the Secret Service pawn, responsible for bribing the man that Farage previously described as terrific and someone who had never let him down. Oh, I'll be all over your front pages tomorrow, perhaps, after the stories about Keir Starmer's donkeys. So, I don't know enough about other political parties, and I know that the notion of tax is increasingly ludicrous, actually. The idea that the country is in dire need of spending, is in dire need of public spending, and public discourse, at least mainstream or above the line public discourse, is almost unanimously opposed to increasing the most obvious and easiest way to increase the amount of money that the government can spend on public spending. I don't know what Rachel Reeves is going to say at 12 o'clock today, but I've got two questions for you. Why? Why is the conversation about money in this country conducted in a way that considers... Do you know what the top tax rate was under Harold Wilson? There's a brilliant thing on the radio the other day. Dan Needle, the tax lawyer, I absolutely recommend that you dig this out. It'll be on the iPlayer or wherever you get your podcast. The BBC Radio 4 programme with Dan Needle, the tax expert, talking about the Laffer curve, which sort of underpins so much of right-wing economic policy. Do you know who was sitting with Laffer at the dinner table when he came up with the Laffer curve that is often used to argue for no tax rises or for tax reductions? Do you know who was sitting with him at the table? I nearly spat. I was on really, really early in the morning. I had a little bit of insomnia in Kidderminster. I nearly rolled out of bed. Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney were sitting at the dinner table with him when he drew this picture of a curve that went on to dominate Republican politics, particularly under Reagan, and continues to do so on the right on both sides of the Atlantic for generations. Truly breathtaking. Two of the most right-wing men, well, in the good old days, two of the most right-wing men you could imagine sitting at dinner with this guy who came up with this thing that sort of says you should never put taxes up because, well, but I was reminded that back in the day, in this country, the top rate of tax was 98%. Hardly anybody paid it. Obviously, if you're being asked to pay 98%, you're either going to stop working to put you into that threshold, or you're going to find some way of legging it. So 98% top tax rate. I mean, that's more than double what it is now. So the reason that I am dancing around this topic is because I think I might be... I don't want to pay more taxes, right? I genuinely don't want to pay more taxes because it just pushes a few things I'd quite like out of reach. And what I think is really interesting psychologically is that they are not things that were within reach 10 years ago. Do you see what I mean? So 10 years ago, I was not unhappy with my lot. Now, I'm completely happy with my lot, but I've started thinking, well, it wouldn't be bad. Well, I'd quite like to have a little place in Greece. Or, that might be, maybe we could, knock the garage down and build a granny flat there for my mum. Or whatever it is. There's always something out of reach. And tax is usually the thing that you think of when you wonder why you can't reach it. The more you earn, the more you pay. And some of the sums of money that you see on your payslip leaching out of your account, it doesn't matter how much you're earning, and in percentage terms, it can be staggering. But I genuinely don't understand how we can have constant conversations about how run down everything feels, alongside constant conversations about how absolutely appalling it would be if taxes went up. So how have we ended up in that situation? 0345 6060 973. And if I said, look, she's going to have to put some taxes up, isn't she? What would you say to me? Okay? That's it. That's the phone in. She's got to put some taxes up. 0345 6060 973. And the problem here is that I don't want to pay more tax. I don't know that I can argue that I shouldn't. And I don't know where the cut-off would be, People who think they should pay more. No one's going to do it voluntarily. That is the single stupidest argument that I've ever heard, and I do this for a living. She should be putting taxes up, shouldn't she? Shouldn't she? Can you tell me why she shouldn't? 0345 6060 973. And why in this country, and I'll take any answer you've got, some of them might be obvious, why in this country is it heresy? In a country that used to have a top tax rate of 98%, it's currently, is it 45 at the moment, the top tax rate? I'd have to check with my accountant. Why in a country that used to have a top tax rate of 98% does a conversation about putting taxes up get portrayed as hysterical or communist or worse? So 2 questions. Number one, we have to, whoever the Chancellor is. There's no argument looking around, unless you're completely insulated from the realities of life. You can't possibly be opposed to taxes going up. Question number 2, why is this country a place where even suggesting that is like painting a target on your head? If you can do comparisons with other countries, I'd like to hear them. I really would. And I don't know that this is actually a question. It's probably more of an observation. But it is pretty much the case, isn't it, that we all think taxes should go up, but not for us.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Mopeds for me. This is when I sort of, I'm the whatever the opposite of a poverty denier is. Somebody who's perhaps a bit too trusting or compassionate, maybe, when somebody presents as being absolutely skint. I'm minded to believe them. The opposite of that, of course, is to accuse them of spending all their money on tenant super, flat screen televisions and silk cut cigarettes. But I do find myself with mopeds. I think the amount of food being ferried around my part of London is extraordinary, and not just London. You could have a Tesco Express delivery to my mum's house in Kidderminster, and that's like £2 or £3 on top of what you would have paid if you got off your backside and gone shopping yourself. In fact, by the time you've knocked the bus fare off, it may not even be cost effective to go shopping yourself by the time you've paid for petrol. But the amount of mopeds that I see buzzing around the place, that's the only time I find myself thinking, I think people are I think people have got a bit more disposable income than they let on. It's so pathetic and so irrational. But how can we live in a country where everyone I'll let Robert explain it. He puts it brilliantly, and then we'll go to Nigel in Red Hill. You cannot have a sensible conversation about tax in this country. Everybody wants first-rate public services, but they don't want to pay for them. If you suggest taxing the wealthy more, then gaslit people on lower wages will leap to the defence of the wealthy. I think we're going to pull that Anira Bevin quote out of the wardrobe in a moment. We've already had the George Orwell one, the 2 most popular quotes in the history of this programme. Always nice when they both get an appearance on the same day, but Robert is right, and it's a mystery I want your help in unravelling. Nigel, you can go first. What would you like to say?
I think it's absolutely right that we do need taxes to go up in this country, and I think the problem is that if you think, I'm 65 years old, when I was sort of coming out of school and university, people didn't have second homes. Now we seem to see that as some sort of divine right. My children, who are both coming out of university, sort of ending university and coming out of it, have been on 2, 3, 4 foreign holidays in the last 18 months. That is something as well. When I was young, we simply didn't have. And I think, we have a much higher, we need to look at where we are. We have a much higher standard of living now. And also, I think that if...
How many foreign holidays have you been on in the last 18 months?
0.
Oh, OK. So you're just jealous of your kids, then?
I'm paying for the youngsters. That's right, I'm paying for the youngsters. Yeah. But I think, and public services, the cost of everything's gone up. We want decent public services, and the fact is now you've got to pay for them. And I think that, to expect...
Who should pay for them? Who should pay for them?
We have to. We have to. And I think, yes, you can look at, the government wasting money and,
yes,
sort of look at, HS2 and all that sort of thing and say, are they spending money on the right things? But I think that we have to understand that, these things have got to be paid for, and we are the people who actually have to pay for them.
And I mean, a lot of people will be following the very splendid contributions to public discourse of Gary Stevenson at the moment, and they'll be thinking of him at the moment because he offers the possibility that it wouldn't be us, it would be the really wealthy that carry the can for this kind of thing.
Well, I think that's there's certainly look at how tax is structured, and I mean you're going back. I remember the 98%. I never actually paid it, of course, but I remember that sort of back in the end of the 70s and that sort of thing when that.
It's what the Beatles were singing as well. It's what the Beatles were singing about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
But so I mean, would you pay more?
I'd certainly, yeah.
Would you?
I look at it in the same way as the BBC licence fee, frankly. I think if you can get the whole of the BBC for 52p a day or whatever it is, you're doing pretty well. And I think that, people have to be realistic about what things cost.
And you're not going to be able to get it all from the super rich. In fact, if you go back to the 98% tax rates in the 70s, the richest people were actually paying less when tax rates were that high than they were when the tax rates actually came down a bit. And that's the point. I mean, we talk about the politically homeless. Who speaks for people who think that they should probably be paying a bit more tax? And an awful lot of the things that our front pages tell us the silent majority is absolutely certain about. And yet you can't do it, because for every Nigel there's a Michael. Michael writes, James, it's OK for you to say put taxes up. You're on a six-figure income. Others like myself are not. And there you go, putting added pressure on the poorest in society. Absolutely clear. If you are among the poorest people in society, you should not be having your taxes increased. But I would argue that if you're among the poorest people in society, you're probably not paying any tax as we speak, or paying much tax as things stand. But I certainly don't think you should pay more. In agreeing with tax raises and laughing about it, he goes on, what a creep. That's a bit unkind. We are in the worst situation we have been in for over 50 years. So if you're speaking about the country, Michael, then you prove my point quite perfectly. We are in the worst situation we've been in for over 50 years, but don't you dare talk about putting taxes up. What's the alternative? To pretend that all the money is going on unemployed people or people with ADHD? To pretend that immigration is the biggest drain upon our economy? What are we going to do? If the things are really the worst that they've been in over 50 years, and you're opposed to increasing public spending through taxation, you are actually in favour of things getting worse, while calling me a creep. Well, I hope that makes you feel briefly better. Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Michael. James is here. James, it's a weird one because Robert's right. You cannot have a sensible conversation about it. We all think public services should be improved, but none of us want to pay for it.
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think we've been conditioned in this country over years and years and years that tax is a dirty word, and sort of it's come from the Reaganomics that we should be paying low taxes. And I feel that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer need to just put their hands up and say, we made a mistake. We said that we weren't going to raise the taxes on income, VAT and national insurance, but actually the situation is a lot worse than we thought. And by tinkering around the edges, as we've been doing so far, we're not going to make a difference to the economy and to the country. And I think they need to hold their hands up and say, we're going to go ahead with this. And then hopefully, by the time of the next election, actually the results of those increased taxes will be able to be seen by the country.
Feel the benefit. What? Where would you put it? I know you've kind of answered the question, but more specifically, where would you welcome, if for want of a better word, tax increases in approximately half an hour's time?
I'd probably say an increase in maybe a penny in income tax. I also think they need to probably look at the income tax thresholds as well, though, to kind of balance it out in terms of actually the public will be looking at, we're not getting anything back from this. Potentially national insurance as well. I do think there was a mistake made when they increased the employer national insurance and the thresholds that applied there. One would have been sufficient without the other.
Yeah, maybe, but you see, I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? And actually, to tie it in with the last hour, that if they do anything that increases the burden of tax being placed upon the kind of people that own and edit newspapers, then the misrepresentation of the facts on the front pages of those newspapers will be up there with what they've done to Keir Starmer's comments on Nigel Farage's latest racist policy this morning. And I mean, it really is part of the... I'll give you that Bevan quote, shall I, James? Because this is one I'm going to have tattooed one day. How can wealth persuade poverty to use its political freedom to keep wealth in power? Here lies the whole art of conservative politics in the 20th century. That was before Arthur Laffer had even drawn his curve on a napkin at a dinner table he shared with Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney. However they do it, whatever they do, they will be pilloried and crucified.
Yeah, that is a dilemma.
You can say that again.
They really are fighting against the tide on anything, really.
But it's such a weird that everybody wants things to be better. Nobody's got a clue where the money should come from, but they're absolutely adamant where it shouldn't come from.
Exactly, and I think it's quite frustrating as well, because I don't think they needed to make that pledge in their manifesto, because when they came in 1997, Labour, they had this reputation of high taxes and things like that. So in 1997, they were coming into a much better economy, and they made that pledge then, and it went down well. I think this time round, the Tories were so unpopular that Labour were almost certainly going to win anyway, and I don't think they needed to do that, and they've made a rod for their own back.
Yeah, that's really nicely put. And again, not to obsess about tying things in with the last hour, but they did so in the belief that you can reason with, for example, the editor of the Daily Mail. But if there was ever any doubt at all about whether or not these people can be reasoned with, or I should perhaps say the owner, the grandson, of course, of the Hurrah for the Black Shirts proprietor, they can't be reasoned with. They'll lie about you if they don't like what you're doing, or if they think that might be able to boost somebody who'll be even kinder to you than previous politicians or previous administrations. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 11. Should we do one of them? Should we do one of those? Should we do one of those? Yeah, let's do one of those.
Missed information.
Thank you, Emily. So here is a story all about how my life got flipped, turned up. So no, I'm only joking. You'll be familiar with my increasing frustration about how my home is portrayed on social media and by liars, often racist liars, in the United States of America and elsewhere. I speak on this occasion of London, not Kidderminster. Donald Trump and his acolytes of phonies have not yet turned their attention upon the beautiful town of Kidderminster. But I speak of London and this idea that we are living in some sort of apocalyptic hellscape. The Mayor's Office has released statistics today that show that crime in London is coming down at a rate of knots. For the 12 months ending last month compared to the previous 12 months, 8,749 fewer crimes that resulted in someone being hurt. That's down about 12%, but I know what the racists are shouting. Oh, you can't trust that. That came out of the Mayor's Office, and I'm going to completely ignore the fact that it's compared to the other figures that also came out of the Mayor's Office, because I'm a massive racist and I hate having a brown mayor, so nothing he says could ever be true. So let's address that then by turning instead to the Office of National Statistics, which shows that in the 12 months to March, Londoners were less likely to be a victim of violent crime. That's 26.4 offences per 1,000 of the population than across the rest of England and Wales. And I confess, even I found that extraordinary. And of course, it's completely immune to the ludicrous claim that this will be a consequence of crime not being reported, because while crime is probably less likely to be reported now than it has been at previous points, this compares area with area, and that would be true of all areas. So the fact that London now has less risk of violent crime than the rest of England and Wales. And again, don't take the Mayor's word for it. Let's go to the Assistant Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, who said homicides is Rachel Williams. Homicide is now at its lowest level in a decade. Violent crime resulting in injury has fallen, and firearms discharges are less than half what they were 7 years ago. I do this job for a living, and I have the Mayor of London in the studio once a month, and I didn't know this. In fact, I would have doubted it if you'd told me, if I hadn't done the research this morning and found, even the Times have had to print it, albeit a tiny, tiny, tiny little story. I don't think I saw it in the Daily Mail, Quelle surprise, or the Daily Telegraph. I could be wrong. The news pages are nowhere near as bonkers, thankfully, as the comment pages. But there it is. So that portrayal of our capital city on social media, often by obvious racists, is not only deeply damaging, it's also deeply bogus. It's completely untrue, culminating in the actual President of the United States of America telling lies about our city during a state visit. No, shortly after a state visit, of course, when he made that completely unhinged address to the United Nations. I just thought you'd probably quite like to know that, because if, like me, you are patriotic or you are loyal to London, you are loyal to your capital city, your home, then you'll probably think that's worth, well, at the very least acknowledging and quite possibly celebrating. Still want more, though. Still want more improvement. But where on earth did the idea come from that we had a particular problem in this city? I don't know why, but that story sits on my desk at the moment, right next to another one. Ed Miliband says it's possible the government should quit X. It's possible the government should come off X, Ed Miliband has said, because Elon Musk is a dangerous man. So I'll leave that one hanging. Where on earth did people get the idea that London was not a wonderful place to live and that it was somehow more riddled with crime than American cities or even other British cities? And should the government actually come off X? Because, as Ed Miliband says, Elon Musk is a dangerous man. I wonder why I'm knitting those two stories together. But there it is. That is today's
Missed information.
Thank you, Emily. Back to tax and why we can't have a sensible conversation about it in this country. You'll have to do pretty well to beat an Irene Bevin, won't you? The reason we can't have a sensible conversation about tax in this country is because wealth has successfully persuaded poverty, and for poverty read labour, like people who work for their income rather than simply reap what they have sown. How can wealth persuade workers to use its political freedom to keep wealth in power? And if you work out the answer to that, then you've probably worked out the answer to why everybody is opposed to tax rises, even people who would not be affected by tax rises. Ali is in High Wycombe. Ali, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello, James. You're my sanity in a sea of crazy.
Well, that's a nice one. I'll have that on a T-shirt. Carry on.
Right, I'm a tax accountant, and I've been banging on about this for ages. When I get the more high-earning clients saying to me, "Oh no, I've just got a pay rise and I'm going into the 45% tax bracket,"
yes.
I basically tell them it's a nice problem to have, mate. Suck it up. Because
suck it up, just because James, who's in the chair today, I don't want him his little finger hovering over the dump button. You definitely said suck it. No, that's quite all right. That's allowed, but you know,
no.
Just for the avoidance, because of course you only pay that on the amount of your income that's over the threshold. I think there's a lot of ignorance out there, misunderstanding, perhaps.
There definitely is, and I think what they should. It's quite simple. I agree with your previous caller in that the government straitjacketed themselves by promising to not tax working people.
Yeah.
It was just such a broad brush they painted there, and they're trying to skip around the edges. And actually, I think, put 1% up on basic rate, put 2% up on higher rate, but in order to then compensate at the lower earning end,
yes,
increase the basic, the personal tax allowance. And I think if they did that, more money would be raised, and those that can afford to pay it will be the ones paying it. Make sure those in poverty don't pay any.
Yes, I would agree with that. But let me read, because this you'll be familiar with this. And let me make sure I've got the right message. And this is part of the problem. And I'm not expecting anyone to crack out their tiny violins, and I don't think Neil would want you to either. But he is real. Neil is real. I'm on 190 grand a year. I would pay more tax if I could trust it actually went to improve services. That's a familiar refrain, which is a little bit impenetrable, but the next bit is what matters. 4.5 grand a month mortgage, 2 kids in private school. There's not loads left to give, and everything is going up in price as well. So even someone on nearly 200 grand a year thinks they can't really afford to pay more tax. And Neil is real.
Yeah, he is real, and he's chosen to, and he is in a privileged enough position to send his kids to private school.
Yes.
And I get that, you commit to stuff, you commit to spending this money because you are a higher earner, and it's almost like we spend to our means.
We always do. That's what I mean. The things that are just out of reach, and then suddenly they're not, and you've got them, and then something else is just out of reach. This is Mr. McCorber territory, isn't it? About, result happiness and result misery. If you're 1 penny over your annual income, you're going to be miserable. If you're 1 penny under, you're going to be happy. But none of us really think like that. And a politician can't change that psychology. You as a tax advisor, fascinating, as an accountant, to see it so clearly. Why can't Rachel Reeves sell it?
I have no idea, because I'm shouting at the radio when they keep banging on about we won't tax working people. But you've got to, but do it in the right way.
Who else are you going to tax?
Who else are you going to tax? Exactly. I want to see the NHS surviving. I want to see those waiting lists come down. I want to see the services improve. The only way to do that is to make sure there is enough tax in the coffers.
And that is the thing that is anathema, really, to public discourse in this country. You go on fewer holidays. Don't send your children to private school. That's tricky, especially it's easy for someone who has done and could afford to say that to other people, to deny them opportunities that you've availed yourself of. But that is the nature of capitalism. Have fewer takeaways, go out less. You will be able to pay the money. You won't, or even move house. Even move house to somewhere where your mortgage is a little bit lower. And you can get to that place if you accept the other bit of this coin, the other side of this coin, which is everybody agrees things have to get better. And the Chancellor will need more money to do that.
Yeah, I would have no problem with Rachel Reeves they're skirting around the edges, this whole employers' national insurance thing that they do.
They're almost like economic euphemisms.
Yeah.
Just do it. Grasp it.
Just do it. Just rip the plaster off.
Yes.
It's painful, but then
what's the point of this £22 billion black hole being front and centre in almost every conversation if they don't make the point that the patriotic duty of all of us is to fill it as quickly as possible so that the country can get back on its feet. Thank you, Ali. We will definitely take this speech in its entirety. I don't think we'll be hearing what Ali wants to hear. I'm not sure we'll be hearing what I want to hear. This is what I like. This is from Ali. That's two Alis. It's probably the same Ali. Is it the same Ali? Did you text me?
No, I didn't text you.
Well, you wait weeks for one Ali to come along and then two pop up at once. So this is a different Ali, and you both spell it the same way as well. I'm a patriot, James. I happily pay my taxes. I want my country to be a place where nobody is going hungry, where you can see a doctor when you need to, and you don't have to worry about finding the money, where people that want it can get a higher education, and where we all look after each other and raise each other up. That's Ali there, playing the role of the anti-Nigel, or the anti-Farage. All of those values, all of those things there are what animate my patriotism and indeed my politics, but they are the polar opposite of trying to blame foreigners or the vulnerable for everything, and indeed resisting and opposing education and serving the wishes of the rich, which is, of course, why the people that own so much of the means of production in this country like nothing more than a little bit of light fascism. 11:43 is the time. Thank you, Ali. Marco is in Fleet. Marco, what would you like to say?
James, you should think about moving your program to the U.S. You are sunshine in the middle of a big storm. What a lovely
thing to say. Do you know that I've picked up more subscribers on YouTube from the United States of America in the last 12 months than I have from the United Kingdom? It's
because
close.
Because we don't have any sense in the country
right, you have
anymore.
You're very kind. You're very kind. Thank you. What did you ring in to tell me?
Well, listen, the problem that we have, and this is a global problem.
Yes.
Governments are not good communicators, and they are horrible money managers. They haven't really think about. I think that it's political suicide if the government comes out and says we're going to raise taxes and we're going to do all of these changes. They are more concerned about staying in power, protecting their seat.
Well, hang on. I mean, you can't have it both ways. It would be political suicide to do it. Therefore, they shouldn't do it. It's a bad thing to remove yourself from power knowingly or deliberately.
Exactly. That's why they're not going to do it, or they don't tell you the full story.
Yeah.
For example, they haven't really come up with a plan where the solution is to create middle class, not to tax the upper bracket. Because that's not sustainable, right? The upper bracket has access to mechanisms to move the money away, to shelter the money.
So this is the hardest pill to swallow, isn't it? The idea that the people who've got more than I've got should get away with it, and I should pay more. I'm not speaking about me specifically, although actually on this occasion the cap fits. But that is the bottom line, like mega mobile wealth, where you'd hit it with a capital gains increases or with wealth taxes or with asset taxes. It is more mobile than middle class wealth or upper middle class wealth.
Absolutely, but the definition of upper middle class. Like, for example, one of your listeners sent a comment saying that they earn 150,000 pounds. 190,000 pounds, right? And they barely are making it. So most people will say, well, they should manage their money better.
Yes.
But to be honest with you, I have friends who both of them work. They earn 80 grand each, and they are commuting 2 hours into London to work because they can't afford to live anywhere closer. So
I know, and you say they should be paying a bit more tax. It feels horribly unfair, but if not them, then who?
But you know what? Hear me out. I haven't done the math. What about the government thinks about moving the brackets up, rewarding everyone? So 30 up from 0 to 30,000, no tax. From 30 to 80, 20%. From 80 to 150, 40. From 150 to 245, and anyone up 350. 50%. So you're rewarding everybody, but what you're doing is...
Yeah, but you're raising less. You would raise... I mean, you do actually need to do the maths in order to sustain that sort of suggestion. And it would... I mean, I'm 95% certain that would bring down the overall revenues coming in, because we're not a very mobile workforce. It's not as if we can go, right, I'm going to earn 50 grand more next year because the tax rates have changed. It doesn't become an incentive, I don't think, in the way that you describe. But I completely agree that tinkering and nibbling is not the answer at a time of national crisis. You know, at a time of national crisis, they need to do something substantive and meaningful, like Ali was suggesting, and like you obviously believe as well. But It ain't going to happen. It was, as Graham points out, Marco, your contribution, and you may not get this cultural reference because I don't know how long you've been living in this country, but it all just went a bit number wang. It did indeed. It's 11:47.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 11:51 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I made a terrible mistake on Friday. I'd like to blame it on other people. That's always my first impulse when I make a terrible mistake. It's a bit like when you tread on a piece of Lego and you want to blame it on the kids rather than on yourself for walking around barefoot in a room full of Lego. But I made a mistake on Friday. I think I may have got talked out of it, but I should have had the courage of my convictions. Do you know what anniversary was marked on Saturday, but that I should have covered on Friday? Do you know what it was? What the big anniversary? I mean, a few bigger anniversaries for a country, and a reminder of when we really were world beaters and world leaders. On the 27th of September, 1825, locomotion number 1 pulled in to Stockton Station. Well, it wouldn't have been a station, I don't imagine, because it was the first ever train or whatever you want to call it, rail vehicle to transport passengers. So I'm fairly confident they wouldn't have had a proper station in place if it was the first ever railway vehicle. 200 years to the day on Saturday, Robert Stephenson's locomotion number 1 arrived in Stockton with passengers aboard. It was met by a 7-gun salute, and a journalist from the Durham County Observer observed, it was found to be quite impossible to restrain the enthusiasm of the multitude. People were so excited. Imagine. I should have done this at the top of an hour because I've got Sam and Sam. 2 Sams. We've gone from 2 Allys to 2 Sams. Was there a programme on the telly called Sam and Ali? Oh, that was Kate and Ali. I should have done this at the top of the show because I want to now spend 20 minutes waxing lyrical about rail travel. I'd even do a phone-in, and I think I was talked out of it. I'd do a phone-in on your favourite rail journey. What's the best rail journey? Don't roll your eyes at me. This is a really lovely question that normal people would find interesting. Could you imagine what life was like before the trains came along? Especially if you didn't have an horse. You'd never get out of your village, would you, or your hamlet? An horse. If you didn't have an horse, you'd never go anywhere. Until the railways came along, you'd never visit big cities. Just think about it. It's only 200 years ago. That's like great, maybe less, 3 or 4 greats probably. They'd have been alive. And there it is. That's a wonderful moment. And we should have done more to mark it. We're going to have to wait to the 300th anniversary now before we can treat it with the respect that it so obviously deserves on this programme. All-time favourite rail journey. It's a tricky one, but I may do it one day. 11:53 is the time. Back to taxes and the curious relationship we have in this country at the moment with the unanimous observation that we need to spend a lot more money on public services and the almost unanimous conviction that money should not be coming from us. Sam's in Cardiff. Sam, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. With the tax issue, certainly I agree with all of your previous callers that they've sort of put themselves in a straitjacket with this. It's obvious that there needs to be more money going into the pot, and it's obvious that the only way it's going to come from is taxes. I think when it hits anyone, irrespective of the sort of wealth that you have or the income that you have, you're then looking at the value of that tax. So you might have to pay another 1p, whatever it is.
Yes.
You're then looking more critically at where that money goes than you would otherwise. And by putting it up by such relatively small increments, the difference that you see is never that big.
So you'd need to really feel the impact in order to feel a lot better about your contribution to it. I reach for the NHS at this point quite often and point out that in 2010, patient satisfaction, and that's a proper measure, was the highest it had ever been. And then you had 14 years of cuts and austerity, and now it's very low. So that would be one area in which you could fairly quickly feel the benefit and impact of investment, couldn't you? Or increase public spending, increase taxation.
Absolutely. But, I mean, my partner is an overseas student and has to pay the NHS surcharge.
I think I got that wrong earlier for the record. I should have collected it sooner. I don't think they'll be required to pay that NHS surcharge when they receive, if they ever do, indefinite leave to remain. It's when you're serving your notice, as it were, that 5 to 10 year business, that you are required to pay the surcharge. I may have got that wrong earlier, so I'm happy to clear that up.
But in paying that, the way that he looks at the value he gets from the NHS is very different to me.
Oh, yes.
We're in Wales. It's particularly bad here compared to England. They get more, the Welsh government, I understand, gets more funding per person than the UK government. So I'm more, well, why is it worse with more money?
Yes.
Whatever the reason. But every time he has an extended wait for any doctor's appointment, the frustration and well, I've paid for this sort of almost more directly than you or me might have.
Yeah. And this is, of course, this is in addition to his taxes. So he's paying what we pay and then some.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, students obviously don't have to work when they're on a student visa,
sure.
But he does work, and he therefore pays a contribution towards the NHS on top of that.
So I want to see the benefit of my investment. And that you're right, though. I mean, in a way, that's one of the things that robust government has to just ride roughshod over. It just simply has to say, look, you're going to have to trust us. We will improve things, and you're going to have to pay for it. But then if you're pointing at comparisons, or if Sam's figures are correct and you are looking at a higher per capita contribution in Wales and you're looking at a poorer performance, then, health and age of the population probably pertinent to that observation, but unlikely to explain all of it, then you've got a problem. How can I trust you to spend the money that you're raising from me if the evidence of my own eyes and ears suggests that you're not spending it wisely or effectively? Thank you, Sam. And now another Sam, this one in Barnet. Sam, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, Sam.
First of all, I just want to say that Sam in Cardiff, I love what he's hitting on with the sort of psychological aspect of it. So I think that's really important.
I do too.
I don't think any sort of class, if you want to call it that, is willing to pay more at the moment. And I think what we should be looking at maybe instead is the way we can use tax to influence behaviour. I think, for example, we've got something called EIS. I don't know if you've heard it.
No. It's not a great phone line. That's the other problem. Go on, just give me your sort of highlights. I won't interrupt you.
Sure. It's a way to incentivise...
Oh, I may actually have to cross... Sorry, this is awful. I'm interrupting you even in the middle of interrupting you. I'm interrupting myself, interrupting you. That's a new low. I think Rachel Reeves is about to start speaking in Liverpool at the Labour Party conference. In fact, she has now taken to the stage and will be making her speech imminently, so I shall cross live now with your permission.
Thank you, Matt, for that incredibly kind introduction. Your enthusiasm alone could power half the country for many years to come. Conference. In June, at the GMB Congress, I was proud to announce this Labour government's full backing for Sizewell C, a landmark investment in a new era of nuclear power. That plant will employ 10,000 people, create thousands more jobs in its supply chains, and produce the energy to power 6 million homes. We made that investment because when we came into office just over a year ago, this country was faced with a stark choice: investment or decline. To invest in Britain's renewal or to carry on with the same Tory economics and the same results. So for jobs and for pay, for energy independence and for our national security, we chose investment. The Tories wouldn't invest when they were in power. The Tories now oppose that choice from opposition. So, conference, don't ever let anyone tell you that there's no difference between a Labour government and a Conservative government. I promised you we would run the economy differently. No longer would we turn a blind eye to where things are made and who makes them, or shrug our shoulders when the national interest is on the line. Because a strong economy must rest on strong foundations. I call that approach securonomics. That's why, when the shipbuilder Harland and Wolff was in danger, we chose to step in, to guarantee a future for shipbuilding in Belfast, in Devon and in Fife. And I am proud to see the British shipbuilding industry going from strength to strength. With just last month, a record £10 billion export order from Norway for Scottish-built frigates. why we're taking action to protect the automotive industry, the jewel in the crown of British manufacturing, with a £1.5 billion loan guaranteed to support Jaguar Land Rover, provide certainty and support for the jobs in its business and in its supply chain. And in April, when the foreign owners of British Steel rejected our offers of support, redirected essential materials overseas, and prepared that company to close, we faced another choice. We could do what the Tories did and stand idly by while jobs and industrial capacity were lost, or we could choose a different path, to take control of that company in the national interest. That was not just an economic choice, but a test of our conviction, our patriotism, and our Labour values. This government was not willing. This government was not willing, I was not willing, to tolerate a situation in Britain's steel capacity was fundamentally undermined. And nor was I willing to see yet another working class community lose its pride, lose the prosperity, lose the dignity that industry provides. So we chose to intervene, to save British steel and the jobs that go with it. The Tories would not back British steel, and they wouldn't back Britain's steel workers. But this Labour government is unequivocal. There must be a future, there will be a future for steel forged here on British soil. I can tell you more. We're introducing new legislation to put our economic security first.
After 2 years of genocide, mass starvation of Palestinians.
We understand your cause, and we are recognising a Palestinian state, but we are now a party in government, not a party of protest. And I'm proud to stand here as your Chancellor. The Chancellor that's increased the minimum wage, a Chancellor that is introducing free breakfast clubs and free school meals, a Chancellor that's overseen 5 cuts to interest rates. That's the difference we make, and that is the difference we make in power, not through protest. Our party has changed, and that is why I am standing here, proud to be your Chancellor of the Exchequer. We're putting Britain first, empowering us to prioritise British-built ships and British-forged steel, strengthening our national economic security, and creating good manufacturing jobs here in Britain. Because where things are made and who makes them does matter. And as we build those new railways and new roads, the new power stations and new runways for this generation and the next, we want the security and the good unionised jobs that come from making things here in Britain. I promised you we'd run the economy differently. The Tories didn't do it, and they still don't get it, but Labour does. So don't let anyone ever tell you that there's no difference between a Labour government and a Conservative government. There is one reason why we have the power to make these choices. It's not a matter of luck or a routine swing in the political pendulum. It is because, thanks, Keir, to your leadership and to the efforts of countless people in this hall and beyond, that we earned the privilege to serve. Because we, every one of us, gave our all to regain the trust of the British people, to earn this precious chance to put our values into practice. Let me tell you what brought me here and what gets me up every morning. Let me tell you what I believe in and what drives me. Conference, you know where I come from. My mum and dad were primary school teachers, and I'm really proud of that. I know how hard they worked to give all the children that they taught the very best start in life. I know how hard all our teachers work. And I know parents' hopes and fears when it comes to their kids. I feel them for my own. But ordinary families find themselves fighting against a system which hoards privilege at the top and leaves too many working class kids behind. I joined the Labour Party almost 30 years ago now because I could see that the Conservative governments I grew up under in the 80s and 90s, they didn't care much about schools like mine. Ellie knows that too. They didn't care much about the kids we grew up with. Textbooks rationed, libraries closed, kids herded into porter cabins, their prospects written off. I joined our party because I wanted to change all that. And those same values drive me now today. Conference, I believe in a Britain founded on contribution, where we do our duty for each other and where hard work is matched by fair reward. I believe in a Britain based on opportunity, where ordinary kids can flourish, unhindered by their backgrounds. And I believe that Britain's real wealth is found not only in the success of the fortunate few, but in the talents of all our people, in every part of our great country. But Conference, we all know that our shared values can only achieve things for ordinary people if we have the power to act on them and a credible plan to put them into effect. A plan fit for an uncertain world in which we find ourselves, not for the world that we wish it might be. A plan to build a stronger, more resilient economy, able to navigate this age of insecurity. No one said it was going to be easy, but take pride in what we are achieving together. Not just the pride in winning, but pride too in the choices we are making and the lives we are changing. Remember that in every single one of the 451 days that we have been in office, we have achieved more than in the more than 5,000 days that we spent powerless in opposition. Every day since the 4th of July last year has brought with it a chance to change Britain for the better. Creating Britain's first genuine living wage, getting spades in the ground on new road and rail projects, backing our communities to strengthen pride in place, including here in Merseyside with the reopening of Southport Pier, investing in homegrown British energy, freezing fuel duty, capping bus fares, recruiting new neighbourhood police, opening school breakfast clubs, expanding free school meals, lifting 100,000 children out of poverty as we do it, and delivering a pay rise, a deserved pay rise, to our nurses, our teachers, our police and our armed forces. And Conference, we're making the NHS fit for the future too, with £29 billion a year towards its day-to-day funding, a record cash investment, the NHS, created by a Labour government, protected by every Labour government, and renewed by this Labour government. Let me tell you something else we will do. I remember as a kid that my school library was turned into a classroom because there were more students than there was space. Think about the message that that sends about a government's priorities. How little value is placed on opportunities for kids to learn and to grow, to explore their interests independently, or to find a quiet place to study that isn't always on offer at home. Under another Conservative government, a generation later, many more kids have that experience. Today in England, there are 1,700 primary schools that don't have a school library. That's not right. and I will not let it stand. So I am committing here today to providing a library in every single primary school in England by the end of this Parliament. That is a statement of my values. That is a statement of the value that this government places on all our children's futures. So, Conference, the Tories don't make those choices. Reform would never make those choices. So take pride. Take pride in our values put into action. And Conference, don't ever let anyone tell you that there's no difference between a Labour government and a Conservative government. Remember how it felt to look on as the Tories took our country in the wrong direction. Austerity, the botched Brexit deal, the mini-budget, school roofs crumbling, NHS waiting lists soaring, 5 prime ministers, 7 chancellors, the worst parliament on living standards ever. Our institutions and our country's very reputation in tatters. And never forget what they did during the pandemic. While we were kept apart from our loved ones and feared for our families, the Conservatives partied in Downing Street and dished out contracts to their friends and to their donors. We are still paying the bill for their waste and their cronyism. So I'm pleased to tell you that thanks to our COVID Corruption Commissioner, almost £400 million has now been recovered for taxpayers that have been lost to COVID fraud. And we will continue that fight. And we will continue that fight to recover more from those PPE contracts that failed to deliver. But we won't stop there. In the coming months, we are bringing in additional new powers to investigate and recover more money from fraudsters who have ripped off the government and ripped off our public services. And I can tell you today too, that to deploy those new powers, we are recruiting a new hit squad to investigate and recover all the money that is owed to the British people. Because, Conference, we want our money back. We are getting that money back, and we are putting it where it belongs, in our communities, in our schools, and in our National Health Service. But the most enduring consequences of the Conservatives' time in office come from their economic failure. They made Britain poorer. They made working people poorer. And they left our public finances in disarray. The single biggest factor underlying Britain's challenges on the cost of living, on the public finances, and on our public services is their 14-year failure on economic growth. If the UK economy had grown at just the average of other advanced economies in those 14 years, our economy today would be £140 billion bigger. That's almost £5,000 for every family in the UK. Our economic renewal will rest on stability to keep taxes, inflation and interest rates as low as possible. Economic reform to unlock the contribution of businesses and working people, and investment in every part of Britain. Each day, I see a country primed for economic success. A skilled and committed workforce, world-class universities and innovative businesses. But the Conservatives and Reform, they want you to believe that our economy is broken, that our best days lie behind us, that decline is inevitable. I fundamentally reject that. It's not the country I see around me, not the future that I believe in. I know that things are still difficult. Bills are too high. Getting ahead can feel tough. And there are still too many obstacles in the way for businesses. And so our central economic objective is to change that. Growth to improve living standards is a challenge, and investment is a solution. By overhauling our planning system, reforming our pension system, launching Britain's very first national wealth fund and a modern industrial strategy, and signing new trade deals to back our manufacturers and our exporters, with India, with the United States, and with our closest neighbours and allies in Europe. Just this month, thanks to Keir's hard work, we secured £150 billion of overseas investment just from the United States. I have never believed the Tory mantra that the best thing that a government can do is to get out of the way. A strategic state must use its power to support jobs and growth, and that includes through public investment. Under the Tories, capital spending was always the first victim when the public finances came under strain. So in last autumn's budget, I changed those fiscal rules to support and to protect investment. And alongside that, because I know that too often our regions outside London and the South East have not had their fair share of spending decisions, I rewrote those rules to support investment in every part of Britain. In place of decline, we have chosen investment. Investment in defence and the good jobs that come with that. In Plymouth and in Barrow, in Aldermaston and Lincoln, on the Clyde and in Rosyth. Investment in energy, in nuclear power, yes, and in carbon capture and storage too. On the Humber and on Teesside, in Aberdeenshire and right here on Merseyside. Investment in transport, including the biggest ever investment in our city regions. We're investing here in Merseyside, with new links in St Helens and major investment in Merseyrail, including a new station at Liverpool Baltic. We're investing in Greater Manchester, with new tram stops in Bury, North Manchester, Oldham and Stockport. And we're investing in West Yorkshire to power ahead with a mass transit system, linking Bradford and Leeds, the largest city in Western Europe without a light rail or metro system, but not for much longer. We're investing in South Yorkshire and backing Doncaster Sheffield Airport. We're investing in the North East to extend the Tyne and Wear Metro, linking Washington with Newcastle and Sunderland. We're investing in the East Midlands to link up the Trent Arc. We're investing in the West Midlands, extending the Birmingham Metro and backing the Midlands Rail Hub to link Birmingham, Worcestershire and Herefordshire with Wales. And we're investing in Welsh railways with new stations and new infrastructure, the benefits of two Labour governments working together. And we're investing in East West Rail to join up the Oxford-Cambridge Growth Corridor and Conference, as well as the Transpennine route upgrade to link Manchester, Leeds and York and the towns in between them. This Labour government will push ahead with our plans for Northern Powerhouse Rail. Plans never delivered by the Conservatives, plans opposed by Reform, but backed by this Labour government, a vote of confidence in the north of England, to get people to work, to connect families, to create jobs, and to build prosperity in towns and cities scarred by underinvestment for far too long. That is what we are achieving together, a Labour government working with our Labour leaders around the country, delivering for working people. We're not just investing in defence and energy and transport. The housing crisis is one of the greatest challenges that we face. Every family deserves the security, safety, and the joy of a good home. That is why we are powering ahead with our commitment to build 1.5 million homes in this Parliament. And any plan to match the scale of that housing crisis must involve a major role for social housing, which is why I allocated £40 billion in the spending review just a few months ago. The biggest cash investment into council, social and affordable housing in a generation. So, Conference, don't ever let anyone tell you that there's no difference between a Labour government and a Conservative government. But conference, let us be clear. All that we are doing is only possible because we, all of us, put in the hard work to show the British people that we could be trusted to manage our economy. Because we were unequivocal in our commitment to economic responsibility. And I will never, ever squander that hard-earned trust. We were able to increase investment only because we remained steadfast in that commitment to economic responsibility. That is not a trade-off with our Labour values. It is essential to our Labour values. Because our ambition for Britain, our dedication to social justice, is not measured in the size of the deficit you are willing to run, but in the choices we make to defend and advance the interests of working people. And responsible management of our public finances is an integral part to that most basic mission. It is because of the stability that we have created that we have seen 5 cuts to interest rates since the general election. Mortgage costs coming down and hundreds of pounds back in the pockets of working people. Conference, every advance we make in getting the cost of living down is a Labour achievement, and we should take pride in that. When I said that we must not and will not take risks with Britain's economic stability, that argument was not just for an election. Even now, with the global uncertainty that we have seen ripple through financial markets, there are still critics out there who would too readily forget the consequences of reckless economic choices. Never forget that in 2 hours, one Friday, almost exactly 3 years ago, the Conservatives under Liz Truss sent mortgage costs spiralling, put pensions in peril, and consigned their party not just to defeat, but to utter irrelevance. That was a warning. And the British people will not forgive any party that forgets it. Conference, let us reaffirm our commitment that we will never ever do what the Conservatives did to ordinary working people in this country. But I do know that there are still people who peddle the idea that we could just abandon economic responsibility and cast off any constraints on spending. They are wrong. Dangerously so. And we need to be honest about what that choice would mean. Because when spending gets out of control, when market confidence is lost, that doesn't just show up in some OBR report and some difficult headlines a few months later. It is felt immediately in the growing cost of essentials and rising interest rates. And let me tell you, there is nothing progressive, nothing Labour, about government using 1 in every £10 of public money it spends on financing debt to interest. Billions of pounds every single year going towards repaying debt racked up by the Tories, paid to overseas hedge funds and investors. That's not how I want to spend public money. In the months ahead, we will face further tests, with the choices to come made all the harder by harsh global headwinds and the long-term damage done to our country, which is becoming ever clearer. Our first year in power was about fixing the foundations. Our second must be about building a renewed economy for a renewed Britain. A renewed economy that works for working people and rewards their contribution. A renewed economy where we reject austerity and support our public services. A renewed economy that supports investment, that gets inflation and borrowing down, and where we build growth in every part of Britain. I will make my choices at that budget. They will be choices to take our country forward. And whatever tests come our way, whatever tests come my way, I make this commitment to you, I will take no risks with the trust placed in us by the British people. Remember everything that is at stake here. The single greatest threat to our way of life and to the living standards of working people is the agenda of Nigel Farage and the Reform Party. Whatever falsehoods they push, whatever easy answers they peddle, however willing they are to tear communities and families apart, they are not on the side of working people. Conference, here are the questions that we must never tire of repeating between now and the next election. Who is standing up for Britain's working people? A Labour government introducing the biggest upgrade of workers' rights in decades? Or a Reform Party which has opposed those rights every single step of the way? Who is standing up for Britain's interests? A Labour government that stands with our allies, or a Reform Party in bed with Vladimir Putin? Who is standing up for Britain's economic stability? A Labour government resolute in getting prices and interest rates down, or a Reform Party that cheered on the mini-budget of Liz Truss? Who is standing up for Britain's businesses? A Labour government that is forging closer relationships with our nearest trading partners? Or a Reform Party who wants to talk Britain down and longs to cut us off from the rest of the world? And who is standing up for Britain's National Health Service? A Labour government investing record amounts in our NHS, or a Reform Party opposed to the very principle of a publicly funded healthcare system free at the point of use? Every time, on every issue, it is Labour that is standing up for working people and standing up for our national interest. Friends, this is a fight that we must win, and it is a fight that we will win. So when you leave this hall, when you return to your communities and your workplaces, let the message ring out that there is only one party that was founded by working people, and only one party that is committed absolutely to defending their interests on jobs and on pay, on rights at work, on health and in our schools, on the safety of our streets and the strength of our communities, on energy security and on national security. The clue is in the name, Conference. That party, the party of working people, is the Labour Party.
You're listening to, well, you've been listening to Rachel Reeves, Chancellor of the Exchequer, addressing Labour conference. Oh, she's back.
It's about the strength of our military and the security of our borders, absolutely. But it goes well beyond that. It's about building a country where we recognise that talent is found in every classroom, not just among those at the top. That working people of every background, wherever they grow up, have more in common with each other than those who wish to divide us. That every town and city, every region and nation in this United Kingdom has a part to play in our shared success. A country where we look out for each other, in good times and in bad, where we back British businesses to succeed in the world, and where we back working people too. So that honest work pays a wage that you can afford to live on. Where we recognise that we are strongest when we work together towards that better Britain. A A patriotism not measured in how quick you are to exclude, how loudly you shout, how willing you are to exploit every division and distort every challenge that we face. But a patriotism measured in our obstinate determination, our impatience, our commitment to building a better, fairer, more prosperous Britain. That is our patriotic mission. Those are our Labour values. Those are our British values, and we will fight for them. Conference, never forget who we do this for. Before the summer, I was at a breakfast club in the north of England. It was 8:30 in the morning, and there was a little boy sitting on the floor playing with his Lego. He showed me what he was building. He was really proud of his project, and he wanted to tell me all about it. I enjoyed sitting with him and listening to him talk. Afterwards, one of the teachers said something that stayed with me. She said, "You know that boy, when he started coming to breakfast here, he didn't speak at all. He was completely silent." I was shocked, but maybe I shouldn't have been. Because stories like that are too common in Britain. And I thought about the money that we're putting into breakfast clubs. What does that pay for? Some toast and cereal, maybe some juice, an extra hour of a teacher's time to keep an eye on the kids. But what does it actually buy? For that little boy sitting on the floor absorbed in his Lego, it bought him more than food. It bought him an opportunity. The opportunity of time spent at school in a more intimate environment, where he could play and feel at ease. The opportunity to start the school day ready to learn. The opportunity of a better start in life, and with it perhaps the opportunity of a better future. Conference, that's what we all fight for. That's who I fight for. That's who this party is for. Kids like him, families like his. I know that there is much more to do, and I promise you we will do it. But we should take pride in the lives already being changed by the choices that we have made. And let me tell you, there is no greater champion for working class kids than my friend and my colleague, our Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson. Believe me, she will not rest, and I will not rest until those barriers to opportunity are torn down. That is what we are in this for, friends. But those barriers don't just vanish the day a young person leaves school. The last Labour government supported hundreds of thousands of young people into work with its New Deal. But once again, under the Conservatives, too many young people found themselves trapped, frozen out of employment, education or training. There's no defending that. It's bad for business, bad for taxpayers, bad for our economy. And it scars people's prospects throughout the rest of their lives. At the spending review, I pledged record investment in skills to support our young people. And today I can announce that with that investment, we will fund a new youth guarantee. Every young person will be guaranteed either a place in college for those who want to continue their studies, or an apprenticeship to help them learn a trade vital to our plans to rebuild our country, or some one-to-one support to help them find a job. But more than that, our guarantee means that any young person out of work, education or training for more than 18 months will be given a paid work placement. Real work, practical experience, new skills. Conference, we won't leave a generation of young people to languish without prospects, denied the dignity, denied the security and the ladders of opportunity that good work provides. Just as the last Labour government achieved that with the New Deal, I commit this Labour government to nothing less than the abolition of long-term youth unemployment. before, Conference, and we will do it again, and that is the difference that this Labour government is making. And that's not all. We should not cut young people off from opportunities that my generation took for granted. And that means rejecting the politics of isolation and division, for which our young people pay the gravest price. It means defying those voices which claim to speak in the national interest, but which demand that our people, our communities, and our businesses suffer the consequences for a Britain cut off from the rest of Europe. I don't want young people to miss out on the chance to enrich their lives through travel, experiencing other cultures, working and studying abroad. Those opportunities cannot and must not be the sole preserve of the wealthy and the fortunate. So, as well as making it easier to trade with Europe, as well as making it easier to travel in Europe, I can tell you today that we are working with the European Union to secure for young people in Britain the maximum economic and cultural opportunities available through an ambitious agreement on youth mobility. So, Conference, don't ever let anyone tell you that there's no difference between a Labour government and a Conservative government. This year has brought its fair share of challenges for our party and our country. They won't be the last. We've turned our backs on the path of decline, and we've chosen investment. But there is further to go. So yes, I'm proud that under our watch, Britain has been the fastest growing economy in the G7. But is there more to do if we want prosperity in every part of Britain? Absolutely. I'm proud to have overseen wages rising by more in the first 10 months of this Labour government than in the first 10 years of the previous Conservative government. But is there more to do if we want to make working people better off? Absolutely. And I'm proud that we've recruited 2,000 new GPs, delivered 5,000 extra appointments and cut NHS waiting lists by more than 200,000. But is there more to do if we want an NHS truly fit for the future? Absolutely. And Conference, we are just getting started. So whatever challenges come our way, don't be deterred. Because I can see the destination if we stay true to our course. A Britain where every child can flourish, no matter their background or their parents' jobs or where they grow up. And never let anyone tell you that there's no difference between a Labour government and a Conservative government. When people ask you, who is this government for? When they ask you, whose side are you on? Then you can tell them. Go and ask the steel worker in Scunthorpe, the engineer in Barrow, the shipbuilder on the Clyde. Ask the mum on the living wage, going to work secure in their knowledge that her children will get a good start to the day. Ask the nurse who has had back-to-back pay rises due to this Labour government. Ask the business facing lower barriers to trade. And ask the patient, finally off a waiting list because of this Labour government. There is further to go. But whatever tests confront us, have faith. Because our party and our country have overcome greater challenges than these. Have faith, because the opportunity to serve is what we came into this for. Have faith, knowing that this Labour government will not rest. I will not rest until our patriotic cause is realised. In a Britain that prizes contribution, that unlocks opportunity, that silences the nagging voices of decline. And never let anyone tell you that there's no difference between a Labour government and a Conservative government. The world may throw challenges our way, but a better Britain is within reach. A Britain where the barriers to opportunity are torn asunder. A Britain able to look outwards with confidence. Defiant in an uncertain world. Powered by the contribution of its people. Hopeful for our shared future. A proud Britain. A prosperous Britain. A Labour Britain. Thank you.
And the final of quite a few standing ovations for Rachel Reeves, Chancellor of the Exchequer, still at the podium. I presume she's finished. She's waving to people in the front row. An impressive speech in many ways. That's certainly your feeling. You know that I reserve the right to click on history on my screen when you send in a message, so the people who are not, if you like, members of the Labour government's cheerleading squad impressed by that speech, arguably rather more interesting than the people who are. And similarly, if you hate everything that they've ever done, and I can tell, of course, by your record of messages to the programme, then the fact that you weren't impressed by this is less interesting. But actually, that's a relatively meaningless observation at the moment, because the feeling has some criticism of her tone. I mean, if you were to be hypercritical, you'd wonder what she actually announced, given that we just spent an hour discussing the necessity of raising taxes. She didn't go anywhere near any of that. Talk before the speech of VAT going up. Listen, I'm only human. And I'm not suggesting for a minute that I wasn't paying full attention for the duration of that 42-minute speech, give or take. Maybe slightly more, in fact, but I might have missed it. Let me just run through some messages, more or less unedited. Davey, I thought she knocked it out of the park, James. I've never liked the woman, says Alan, but that was a damn fine speech. I had been considering the Liberals and even reform, writes Sean, after nearly being convinced by my son, but this speech by Rachel Reeves is fantastic and it's firing me up for Labour again. To me, this sounds, says Julius, like a serious speech from a solid, committed, competent politician. So unlike the pandering, chaotic, gratuitous media circus that characterises the fraudulent Tories and racist Russian agents. Make of that what you will. If you're still keeping an eye on your messages, writes Brendan, it's looking like time for a rehash of the old "What Have the Romans Ever Done For Us" sketch. It was a helpful list of things that have actually been achieved. Mark asks, do you get paid by the hour, James? If so, like now, with Rachel Reeves talking, or PMQs on Wednesday, do you still get paid when you don't have to do anything, or do you pop out for a Big Mac? Both. Mark on a good day. She's a good speaker, says Graham. Moderately impressed with this. Good to get cheers for reading out about new tram stops. It certainly is. Chris, swinging the other way, really. Pretty meh, MEH, so far. We've heard this every year from every government. That's not actually true, but I take your point about it feeling like it is. Bloomin' Eck, writes Alid. I don't know why, but this really got me. I feel emotional thinking of that little boy. The difference that a breakfast and interaction can make to some children. And Sam, great speech from Reeves, but it won't mean anything tomorrow when the Mail, Express and Telegraph report that she turned up in a burqa and announced a tax break for transgender solar panels. Please have a discussion about how or whether Labour should tackle the media outlets evading any obligation for accuracy and truth. I kind of have, and I kind of did, but a little more on the... the British politician accepting money from a Kremlin stooge to make pro-Russian statements in the European Parliament after this, because it turns out that while the UK media could do a rather better job in reporting it, The New York Times has. So we'll speak to the journalist who covered it for them in a moment. And I may canvass a little bit of reaction to that speech from you, or I may leave the field clear for Sheila, who will be with you at the usual time. But a nice reception in the hall, a very nice reception in the hall. I'll share some of my thoughts after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
49, last word on that speech from the Chancellor goes to Roddy for now, before Sheila arrives here in the 10 minutes or so time. He writes, that was almost as long as one of your monologues, James. Yeah, not wrong, Roddy. Felt even longer, didn't it, at times? I've mentioned to you a few times today that a former leader of Reform UK in Wales, a very close ally of Nigel Farage, the man who, of course, considers Vladimir Putin to be the most admirable politician in the world, pleaded guilty on Friday to charges of bribery while he was a member of the European Parliament. He took the money to deliver pro-Russia statements in the chamber, and more, actually, which hasn't been fully reported in much of the UK media, but has, I'm delighted to tell you, been properly reported in the New York Times. And it was from the Old Bailey in London that Lizzie Dearden filed on this case on Friday. Lizzie, give us the full rap sheet, as it were, before we continue.
Hello. So we should say that there's still a lot we don't know, because all we have had is a series of pleas to 9 charges that Nathan Gill faced. And all he did was get up and give those pleas. But what he admitted was 8 charges of bribery in 2018 and 2019, when he was paid by a pro-Russian Ukrainian politician who now we think lives in Russia and has been sanctioned under the anti-Russian sanctions program for pro-Russian political influence internationally. Nathan Gill was paid by that man for a series of activities when he was a member of the European Parliament, first for UKIP, then for the Brexit Party. Those included making specific speeches, organising meetings, and also appearing on a Ukrainian news channel, which was eventually banned by the Ukrainian government as Russian propaganda.
Were we expecting a guilty plea?
No, actually, we were all kind of caught on the hop. It was. There's something called the terror list at the Old Bailey, which is now a kind of terror and espionage list where a very senior judge kind of assigns different cases to different places. And normally you're just there to get dates in your diary rather than something major like this happening. So it came as quite a surprise. And I should say that there was one count that he denied. He denied a count of conspiracy to commit bribery, which covered a slightly longer period between 2018 and 2019, and was a kind of general count to encompass what the prosecution said was a wider agreement between Nathan Gill and his Ukrainian kind of handler. And he denied that, but he admitted all the individual instances. So the prosecution decided not to go to a trial about that first count, and we're going straight to sentencing for the wider case.
When is the sentencing, and what more might we discover when it does unfold?
So the sentencing is happening on the 21st of November, and that will be the first time that we actually hear Nathan Gill's case. In terms of, he probably won't make a statement himself, but the barrister representing him is likely to give what they normally call mitigation, any sort of reason or justification or excuse or mitigating circumstances about why he entered into this arrangement in the first place. And that's really what we don't know, because we have the dates of these individual instances, but we have no idea about how he even came to be in touch with this man and how the agreement actually came to be made.
And how much do we know about the interventions that were actually made in the House? Because some of the ones I've seen, to be fair, I've heard other members of his political party make very similar points, albeit that we're not aware of them being in receipt of any bribes from Kremlin stooges. It's the idea that Russia was justified in the invasion of Crimea and the usual guff about NATO posing a threat on their borders, and essentially Kremlin-defined talking points that I've heard other politicians make, but he is the only one suspected or known to have accepted money from this character.
So there were two speeches on the indictment, and one was in December 2018. So in the timeline of the war in Ukraine, this was before the full-scale invasion in 2022, but it was after the war started in the region known as the Donbass in 2014. And his speech was actually about what he called the freedom of the press, and it was about two Ukrainian news outlets which years later were ultimately banned as being a sort of arm of the Russian state or Russian interests. And he was essentially saying that Ukraine shouldn't move against or ban those outlets. And he made a very similar speech regarding those two outlets and what he called freedom of the press a few months later. And actually, the outlets that he talked to in those speeches to the European Parliament, he was also paid to appear on himself under those bribery arrangements.
So a sort of Ukrainian equivalent of Russia Today, then, or perhaps even more closely allied with?
Essentially, yes. Okay. And the man who owns those channels, I mean, try and walk with me here. He's a guy called Viktor Medvedchuk, and he is very close to Vladimir Putin. And in fact, he's so close to Vladimir Putin that one of the things that Nathan Gill was paid to do was to arrange an event for this man, Viktor Medvedchuk, to present what he called a peace plan for Ukraine to the European Parliament. And the very next day, literally the day after, Viktor Medvedchuk was with Vladimir Putin in a meeting that was photographed and sort of broadcast by the Kremlin itself. They released a transcript where he told Vladimir Putin all about this great event, and he made reference to meeting a British MEP who we think was Nathan Gill, and Vladimir Putin basically said, "That's great, we approve of it, sounds wonderful."
Gosh, I suppose it merits a mention at this point that Gill's close friend and colleague Nigel Farage regularly got paid to appear on Russia Today and has also made comments about how much he admires Vladimir Putin and how justified that original invasion of Crimea was, but absolutely no suggestion that he's accepted any bribes from anybody to make those interventions in public life. Do we know any more about Voloshin, about Oleg Voloshin, the official sort of on the hook for actually making the payments?
Yes, so he was an official in the kind of pre-Maidan protest, if anyone remembers that. So in 2014, the Ukrainian government, as was run by a guy called Viktor Yanukovych, who was perceived to be very close to Russia and eventually fled the country and gave up his government because of large-scale protests. Oleg Voloshin was that guy's spokesperson for the foreign ministry. So he was a very senior official in that Kremlin-backed Ukrainian government that then collapsed. And since then, he's been a part of various pro-Russian Ukrainian political groups and campaign groups and parties, all of which in their different forms have now been banned. We believe he's now living in Russia, and he has been sanctioned by both Britain and the US, and he has been sanctioned specifically for pro-Russian influence activities.
You probably won't comment on this, Lizzie, you're far too professional, but why am I relying on someone who has been filing for the New York Times to bring me this level of detail in this case rather than a British newspaper?
I mean, no shade to my colleagues. I'm sure everyone's looking into it. I think the fact of the matter is we were all caught a bit off guard, and I have the luxury of time that a lot of my court reporting colleagues don't have.
What a pro. Lizzie, it's always a pleasure, and thank you on this occasion for shining light into some particularly murky corners. Someone called Zia Yusuf, who is not elected to any role but has been doing the interview rounds for Reform UK today, was asked by, I think, just one interviewer about this case when he was out there confirming or amplifying the Daily Mail's lies about Keir Starmer earlier today. Here he is on BBC Breakfast.
Anybody else in your party share his views?
Whose views?
Nathan Gill's views.
No, again, I've never the first time I'd ever heard his name or seen his name was in news reports. This is somebody who was active in what was an extremely nascent party at the time, many years ago. I've never spoken to him. Most people in the senior leadership team have never really even heard of the guy.
Well, viewers have just seen pictures. Sorry, let me just explain. Let me just be fair to you, because you can't necessarily see what's going out on screen. We've just shown our viewers some pictures of Nigel Farage with his arm around him, holding a union flag. They obviously knew one another pretty well.
Well, I don't think, whatever that footage is, look, Nigel meets tens of thousands of people on an annual basis, ultimately, and he can't be held accountable for the actions of every single person whom he comes into contact with. But of course, look, given he has pleaded guilty, I have no concerns at all in telling you that is atrocious behaviour, and we condemn it. But again, I've never met the guy. Reform is a very nascent political party.
That's extraordinary. Nigel Farage meets tens of thousands of people, and presumably it could have been any one of them that he decided to make leader of Reform UK in Wales in 2021. Where do they find these people? Absolutely extraordinary. Almost as extraordinary as having him on your radio programme for an interview and not asking him about this. But just in case anybody needs any more help, here is Nathan Gill on Russia Today just a few years ago.
He's going out on a high, and who can blame him for doing that? But Article 50 has not even been invoked yet. There's even talk of legal challenges, and it might not even happen at all. No, listen, I've just had lunch with Nigel Farage, and he told me that he is adamant that he believes that Article 50 will be invoked. He said if he thought it wasn't going to be, he would never have resigned today.
So, close friend, close colleague, appointed to the leadership of the party in Wales, and yet, according to Zia Yusuf, who I'm told is the chairman of the party, nobody knew who he was. Somebody's lying to you. I wonder who it might be. And when I say close friend, close colleague, I should also say fellow admirer of Vladimir Putin and indeed defender of Russian interests when it comes to the carnage in Ukraine. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. That's it from me for another day. I'll be back tomorrow morning from 10. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player and the LBC app, where you can stay up to date on the top stories and opinions, put your news categories in the order you want, and all of the rest of rewinding and pausing and sundry other joys. Download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Tom Swarbrick will be with you at 4 on LBC, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.